orders of that planning commission, it's April the 8th, it's about, it's after 6, we have a little late start today. Oh, thank you, George.
Move to approve the agenda as printed.
Thanks, Jason. Is there a second?
And I do point to the mic is on, by the way.
My voice went on.
This one's on. Oh. There you go.
There you go. Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Jason was,
Jason?
moved to second. Over?
Yes. You taking those?
No, I don't. Yeah, for myself.
Oh, you do. Any conflict of interest that anyone has on the hearing? General public comment? Anybody want to make a comment about anything that have to be on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none. Minutes of the March 25th meeting. Anybody got any corrections, adjustments?
I had one comment. We're talking about the Main Street development and parking.
Yeah.
I think it should be more specific on what we were talking about for parking.
What's that?
What are you talking about, Craig?
The old business.
Old business, yeah.
Business aid. Okay.
Just explain what we're talking about. On-street parking, whether on-street parking should be allowed. State parking is not.
You just want to clarify that we're talking about on-street parking.
Right.
Okay.
And whether that should be allowed or not.
All right, we can add the words on-street to parking. I'm seeing a couple places we could add those.
Tim?
I move to approve with the changes.
Support. Okay, those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. We'll move on. Communications, Miles.
We have none at this time.
Old business, townhouse. Miles, want to give us a introduction?
Yeah, just gonna run down, obviously, a couple things have changed. So, since our last meeting, if everyone recalls, we had the developer here last time, we had a township engineer here last time as well. We went through some of the engineering, I wouldn't call them like conflicts or even concerns, that the engineer would like to see. The developer seemed pretty amenable to a lot of those concerns. They sent in a new set of plans following that meeting. We had so many, not full agency reviews, but so many engineering reviews. We ended up color-coding in the packet what the new comments from the engineering teams were. A lot of this, as I think the developer stated last time too, can be typically worked out during the civil engineer phase, but there's just some things that rise to the level of do we feel like the site is functional where we want to take care of it on the front. So that's kind of the fine line we were trying to walk down the engineering front, which is solve things that rise to the level of functionality of the site while not trying to solve for every engineering thing that can possibly happen, which we know is going to come up and need to be addressed during construction review. So on that note, we got, following that third review from at least the engineering firms, so that's all the engineering units are Board of Water and Light, SCUMA, the township engineer, road commission engineers. So with that third round of reviews, I basically just asked them, are we at the point where you at least feel comfortable enough for this to move through the planning commission to the point where we're doing a civil plan review where we can hammer out the rest of the details there? They gave me the verbal, thumbs up saying they feel confident that we could at least address what we need to address at this point during a civil review. That doesn't mean alignment of pipes won't change as it always does.
Yeah.
I think even the board took action last night related to some of the alignment for Board of Water and Light when it came to Meadowbrook Phase 3. There was some looping that was required of them, the board sent some stuff to the township to certify that could exist within the current system. The township board certified that last night. So just an example of how some of this engineering stuff that has to be hammered out on the back end, and all these agencies have their own standards which have to be met by the developer regardless of what happens with the planning commission. On that note, one item where I'm out of date on this planning staff report is in the summary of recommendations. This is the same recommendations from our last meeting, some of these which are mute at this point. However, we did have time to pay attention to the part that we feel is most important for tonight's meeting, which is we reviewed all of the proposed conditions of approval and made sure those are applicable for what we're talking about tonight based upon the latest set of comments and the latest plans we have available. And obviously subject to whatever this body deems tonight as the development that we are talking about is a use permitted by a special use permit, and therefore the Planning Commission, again, as I've stated in the past, has wide latitude on conditions, restrictions that can be placed on this development, with obviously within reason. Another point of note that I should probably bring up if it hasn't been apparent or brought up in the past, I'm going to use some example here from DeWitt Township as just what this product looks like versus another product and how that could affect zoning. So if everyone's familiar with this development, it's on State Road. Obviously DeWitt has different zoning than us, and those minor details matter, but the development that we're looking at tonight would be more like this product that I have highlighted here, where you'll see a number of dwelling units existing within a larger parcel. And even this, for example, wouldn't be allowed in that township. We wouldn't allow a property line to cut structures. It just wouldn't meet our zoning. We would request the developer combine these two properties before we would have brought this in front of the Planning Commission. However, that's very different than this product here, which this is more similar to the product I think that Kessler's most recently brought before the Planning Commission.
Miles, will you click on that second parcel? I'm just curious about the size of it.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are they counting all that green space? Or?
So it depends on how DeWitt's ordinance is written, but I would assume that they probably just have what most Midwestern communities have, which is a lot coverage calculations based upon the structures themselves. We go a little bit above and beyond that at Bath Township. We even, in my time, amended some of that to read as any impermeable surface. And then we have other language which speaks to, so like if the lot coverage calculation in D development is 75%, then the green space is in turn 25%. So,
That's probably aligns to our rural character and
Yeah.
in our comprehensive plan.
yeah, I mean, like I said, even in my time here, we amended some of that just to try to, and that was when Dan was still the chair, to do exactly what Commissioner Almore you said, which is just kind of honor the legacy of that township. So I just thought that was important because that plays a role in how the planning department interprets setbacks, how we interpret what is a drive, what isn't a drive, what's an internal drive, and how we categorize this land use. So the developer is calling these townhomes, and from the building department, let's say if and when a project like this would get approved by the Planning Commission, how it's treated for zoning review is going to be very different than how the building department will treat this. Words like row houses, townhomes, detached condos versus attached condos, if you look in the State of Michigan Building Code, which is a very thick book, those words mean something, and then what the requirements are for building code standards mean something. So townhomes, you can get away with less firewalls than you can with attached condos. But in terms of planning and zone use policy within that township, since this is a multiple of dwelling units on a single parent parcel, we just treat these as a multifamily dwelling via the single-story apartments. So that's the land use category that we're throwing this in, and obviously it's being coupled with the planned unit development. That way the Planning Commission has flexibility to interpret the zoning. Because it's a pretty traditional layout these days, but still something that, more traditional zoning wouldn't allow for this, and putting that PUD classification over, it's just almost become standard practice for planners when we're evaluating these types of land uses. And you can argue whether that's good or bad. So yeah, that's what we're looking at tonight, a multifamily dwelling, single-story apartments, and a townhome. I think you could even argue if they're more like townhomes or more like condos, but kind of the townhome/condo style is how they appear. There's some renderings there on the board, which I don't think were included in the packet. I think that's on me, that's not on the developer. And yeah, it's permitted by special use permit in that township and the zoning district of development.
Can you pull up Township Ordinance, Section 19.08? This is the PUD ordinance.
Yes.
So there's about 15 more units than what's allowed per the PUD ordinance. Now, if you look at the next section, Section 6, bonus density, and this is where I think some of us, we have some flexibility to allow greater density than what is allowed in the above section. But if you read that, there's, the criteria are very specific in terms of the design of the sites should have advantages to the community or be an asset to the community. You can see the various percentages. The concern I have is that I don't see a way to justify the 15 extra units on this parcel, given the development and our historical concerns about lack of amenities, like pools, courts and stuff like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that's, I mean, if we're in agreement on this,
Right.
that I think might, have some options for addressing some of the other concerns that the engineers had related to the roadway and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, from the planning department's perspective, I think that's valid. Obviously, early on in this project, it's reviewed by the zoning administrator, which at that time is Bert Gale, and still technically is Bert Gale. It didn't get brought up. The planning, as Commissioner Almareggi said, and maybe that's because he was confident in, sometimes with Bert too. PUDs, common thing in a lot of districts, Bert does a lot of communities, so maybe he was thinking about one section. But it seems like, to Commissioner Almareggi's point, there is room for flexibility, and I would just say, based upon what I'm hearing tonight and a little bit before the meeting, it seems like there's flexibility for the planning commission, but that decision is totally up to the planning commission. The PUD language is built in place in most communities in Michigan to give this body the flexibility where they can make a decision. So that is not my job to advocate for or against, so I'm not gonna do so.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was on the planning commission when we added this language, or at least updated it. And the intent here is that we are willing to add flexibility, but there's a quid pro quo type situation where, are they providing a benefit to the community? Are they beautifying the community? Are they doing something that protecting a unique ecological asset? And again, maybe they are. I don't see it.
Are the housing units themselves not a benefit to the community?
Not any more than any other housing units that would have to comply with the ordinance.
I don't know, Chair, if you wanna have the developer respond on their
Well,
thoughts.
I'm kind of curious as to why this is not a residential development as opposed to a de-development, which I would think would be commercial development. In a residential development, you're allowed 7 units per acre.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, George, go ahead.
Jason, do you have some idea or maybe a suggestion that might be a solution or a help to that issue?
Yeah, I think we just mandate that it's 4 units per acre.
Instead of 8?
is it 8 per acre? I didn't do that calculation.
I think it's 7.
No.
This is something where I wouldn't wanna make a zoning interpretation on the fly, I mean, this is just getting brought in front of me tonight, you know?
Yeah.
So I would need time to go back, the zoning language is a complex document.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure
the zoning
is.
district, to your point, John, it is development, so.
Yeah, I was just kinda curious, because I don't know, what's Somerset? Somerset development?
It's development.
So we don't actually use the high-density residential development at all then?
How many units are in Somerset?
Well, let's see, let me do some quick math here.
About 330.
Yeah.
How many acres?
Well, they're split between a number of parts, so we're 30 acres on this parcel, and then we are 16.3 acres on, round up 16.4 acres on the other parcel.
46 acres then,
46, 47 acres, something like that.
and there's 330? I see you got your calculator out, Jason.
I mean, at the 4 units per acre, I mean, that'd be 184 units.
I think it's 300, so it's way.
Yeah, that's way over.
But that may have been developed before we had this language in place.
Yeah, that's why zoning interpretations are complicated, and I'm not gonna make a decision on the fly here tonight.
Yeah.
I can only move this forward with the interpretation that the zoning administrator's given me at this point.
Yep. Anybody got anything else they wanna?
So if they did something that would benefit the community, basically, that would,
I mean, so, I think for the last 4 times it was brought before us, we've always had the same thing, like, where are the amenities for the residents, right? And so, that's been a sticking point, and so here it is yet again before us. I'm assuming that the amenities issues is still there, but it's muted by the infrastructure issues that are, in terms of the sewer elements, so. I just take a close read at things and,
Yeah.
since we as a body create these
Right.
ordinances,
Yep.
we should
Should live by 'em.
adhere to the ordinances, and so.
No disagreement there, I just want all the commissioners to know we obviously appreciate that.
Yeah. Understand this is, the intention was this is a 55 and older community, is that correct?
I bet older people, I'm almost 55, I like amenities.
Well,
I'll
I
use a.
think-
John,
Yes,
I'll point something out.
absolutely.
Miles, can you go to the ordinances and go to 1908B4A? Not sure if this is helpful or not, but it seems like it allows some flexibility.
Oh, sorry, I'm on B4A, yeah.
There we go. Planning commission may increase or decrease setbacks, dwelling types, building height, frontage, parking spaces, use restrictions, and other. So I don't know if that's, I haven't looked at the ordinances enough to know if that's applicable in this situation, but just wanted to bring that to your attention.
So I think those types of requirements are the ones that would be standard for I went down this pathway because I was looking at the front and rear setbacks, and so front setbacks are 50 feet. I was like, all right, well, this must be under the planned unit development, and so I think that discretion of what we can be more flexible with is related to the standards restrictions of the zoning district.
As the planning commission deems necessary. Again, if this is a sticking point, Chair, where you feel like an interpretation needs to be made as zoning, we can make that before the next meeting, but, it's not somewhere, there's too many things now.
It sounds like we're getting into muddy waters.
Well, of course, sir, I mean, whenever you have, just by the nature of the PUD district, that is built to, again, give planning commissions across the state of Michigan the ability to make determinations. It's
Yep.
wrote very intentionally to put the authority with that planning commission.
Would you gentlemen like to have Mr. Ide to join our discussion?
Sure.
I would like to hear, like, if somebody has solutions to these issues, it would be wonderful to hear ideas for that.
Great, thank you, Mr. I.
I guess I'm a little bit surprised that we're talking about numbers of units, given that this has been going on for months. We originally came in here years ago with multi-story, multiple units. We're way so far past that. We're into a single story, 55 and older, not restricted to 55 and older, 80 some units. It's a good use. I know you've been after some amenities. This is not the type of complex that is looking for volleyball courts or tennis courts or pools. That's not who I'm after. I'm not after those people that are looking after those types of amenities. It's not a requirement. So that's why we're not. And it's only 88 units. So again, I think you're well within the zoning category and the density. We did Somerset at, I think it was 8 or 9 units an acre. And it still falls within the D developmental. So where the PUD portion is starting to confuse this, I don't understand that part, but I'm looking to get going.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Kate, you look like
Well, I don't have a question.
you have a comment.
I have a comment. I guess my frustration with the current dialogue is that this is at least the third, fourth time that we've looked at this since I've been on the planning commission, so just a year, not even a year and a half. And this is the first time it's coming up. And so that's where my frustration lies, is I feel like that is a step one consideration, not a step however many we're on type consideration. And that I'm not a developer, but my sympathy would lie with the developer in this case if I was at step 10 in the project and getting hung up on a step 1 checkbox issue. That if our zoning administrator checked that box and now we're coming back and trying to uncheck it far down the road, to me that doesn't seem like the mission that I would think the planning commission should have. Do I support following our zoning rules? Absolutely. But I think in the right way, in an amenable, reasonable way. That's my feeling.
Thank you.
May I reply?
Yep.
I tend to be the person who brings these things up, right? And so I think part of this is that every time we look at this, we learn something about the project, right? And so I don't think it's fair to say that, we cross pathways. When it came to the Kessler project, there was very similar issues in terms of setbacks, right, and lot widths. And so that was something that should have been caught at the beginning of the process as well, right? And so the lot widths did not meet the ordinance requirements. And so that got brought up and that became something that we couldn't work around. So here we are again. The issue is that my impression is that we have a building administrator who does or does not work for us anymore, who was not interpreting our own set of ordinances correctly. Does that mean that we rubber stamp an incorrect assumption? Or do we honor the decisions that we as a community have made in terms of how we want our community to look through our ordinances?
Well, I think that's why the ordinance has some leeway built into it, because I think very few things seem to be black and white. I've yet to have some sort of development come in front of us that was a black and white situation. Also, I think amenities add cost, and if we were looking to keep a residential place at a reasonable cost, which does not currently exist in Bath Township, to my knowledge, I would think, I'm not a developer, but I would think having a pool and having all those other things require maintenance, and I would think that would add to the cost of getting into a place like that. I'm hoping that some of these, that people who currently live in Bath Township might move in there and free up some of the larger size housing that we currently have in the township that everybody else wants to get into. I don't know if that's what you're thinking, who you think might move there, but that seems like one positive is that it might free up some other mid-size housing in our township, which is in high demand.
Brett, do you have something?
I guess just, is anybody else familiar with that ordinance? I mean, I've been on the planning commission a short time, and there's hundreds of pages of these
Yeah,
ordinances.
there is, and
But usually, like Kate said, in most of these ordinances, there is some room for flexibility,
yep.
in the cases where it makes sense. So is this a case where it makes sense?
Can I just answer
And
that a
is it
little bit?
interpreted
It seems
correctly?
like a question that's more for staff. So again, to Commissioner Almaridge's point, I can't speak for Burke Hale's interpretation, so I'm not going to try to do so. Moving forward, is stepping into the role of the township zoning administrator soon, indicated that that will be the plan. I'll likely take a different approach to zoning administration. With that being said, based upon the conversation, and again, if we need a full zoning interpretation write-up, I'd be more than happy to do so. I cannot do that from this position tonight. But from the conversation that we've had tonight, I feel confident that if this land use was to move forward under some of the provisions that look like they've been spelled out in the, PUD section of the ordinance, the unique layout, dwelling count of this development would not hold the planning commission to some kind of account on future developments, you know? It would be under this body's authority within the PUD ordinance of the decisions that were made tonight based upon this unique development and its unique circumstances.
So, I mean, let's read section 5 of the PUD ordinance, because it's pretty clear.
I think that section, I get what you're saying, Commissioner Almaridge, but that section here, this part at the end, all other standards as the planning commission deems necessary, all other standards.
So that's sub A of 4, but then the very next section is 5, right, which says here, the density dwelling units per acre in a PUD shall not exceed the allowed dwelling units per acre for the zoning district in which it's located.
I understand.
Flexibility is the setback requirement, so you can
It says
cluster.
all other standards as the planning commission deems necessary. A majority vote from this planning commission, the power's with you guys, and I think that's a good thing, because to your point, I think what it's attempting to do there is set reasonable expectations for the planning commission and for the developer of what's reasonable. And you could argue what's reasonable or not, and even the flexibility of what's an asset and what's not, I think words like that are chosen intentionally, because they can be interpreted.
And maybe I'm in the minority in terms of what my interpretation is.
Yeah,
I mean-
no, I think your interpretation has merit. I
I think
also
it's merit too.
think this development is not that much different than the existing development to the north, which is Somerset in terms of lot density. And I don't think that we've really had any issues with that as far as, use of the space goes. Now, there are amenities there, but I also think it's an obsolete, different clientele that live there. And, if this is gonna be a 55 and over community, there's a different set of expectations and amenities that people in that age group are interested in, I'm sure.
It's not limited to that, 55. Can,
And again, just to play all sides here a little bit, cause I'm trying to thread a weird needle right now. This is a use allowed by special use permit. The planning commission can vote yes here, they can vote no, and they can vote everything in between, yes with condition.
Right.
is there
Go ahead, George.
I see you have landscaping map up there, is that what you got?
Yeah, the landscaping page.
Can you zoom that up for me? And
Yeah.
is there, when I tried to look in the packet, I was pushing my brain limit at the time.
You'll see these trees are marked as, I believe these are existing, and then these are called out as trees and bushes to be introduced.
And, is there any walkable,
Yeah, there's some sidewalks on, both sides with the, interior drives. They have an interior pedestrian network as well.
nothing going out to the, there is?
They make a crossing here,
Okay,
they show a crossing here. And they show a crossing here
I'm correct that the Somerset will be connected to our new sidewalks.
To our new sidewalk
Yeah.
system, it will
Yeah.
here,
Yeah,
if you can see that at the top of the page.
cause if it's 55 or over, there are gonna be a lot of walkers.
yeah.
And you know what that's like in your neighborhood, when you see people walking in your
Oh, yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, a lot of walkers, even when it's cold like this, you know, walking.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, it says special considerations or something like that, amenities. This kind of a development is something that, we're looking for lower income housing for people. Can,
The buzz term for a product like this would be moderate income housing.
moderate, okay,
Yeah,
less than high. Can that be, can that be a consideration as to why we allow so many units?
Yeah.
To make it. so
That's
that
what I'm
maybe-
saying, as trustee Hagerman was saying, asset is a word that can mean many things to many people, and I'm not gonna try to get into the interpretation of what that means.
Mark, you had something?
I do, because one of the things in the year and some that I've been on, we've been looking at and talking about the housing stock and finding things in ranges. And this is one that we don't have, to this level and I think it's a positive. I don't disagree with you about the density, but we have the flexibility to allow it. It was done in the other piece of this, and it was laid out for apartments on this section, but you changed that, correct? And so it was basically looked at in prior edition, just like the HDI Meadowbrook West was supposed to be apartments, and we changed it. I don't see,
You could still do the same thing with 15 fewer units,
except for
which would
the
add green
viability,
space
yeah.
and perhaps provide more flexibility for a secondary egress.
Where is the secondary, could you show me that?
Yeah, so the egress option, so the egress thing was something early on that was problematic on this site. So the issue that we ran into, just to rehash that a little bit, is our initial thoughts in our talks with the road commission, cause they wanted to see looping in. If everyone remembers, that's why the Ides
Oh,
had to
yeah.
go to the road commission to get a deviation from their standards, and that was, ultimately given for this project. Because there's limited access from MDOT here, because of the exit from the interstate. So a natural path for egress would have been to put it here, but MDOT won't allow it by their standards, and so the road commission's hands were tied there. So then, in an effort to not disturb this, we were like, the only other, we could put a drive right next to this drive. We felt like that didn't provide us enough benefit to require of the developers to be permanent. Now, that's not to say that couldn't be a condition of approval, I'm not saying that. But the ultimate solution that we've landed on through these talks, and this was spelled out at our last meeting, I think, Sam, you're the one that ended up actually suggesting this. I can't remember if it was in the meeting or in one of our internal engineering meetings, but providing the emergency easement from this parcel to the north.
I did, and then I saw that my engineer had actually slid, if I'm understanding this right, he slid the buildings down. He slid to the south to be able to access on the south, or maybe I'm thinking of it.
That was what we originally
Right.
asked for, was sliding these south and then allowing for a path, but I didn't see that, at least in the latest plans.
Okay,
We're-
maybe he did, so.
That's
so
why
then-
we still had in our condition gaining that easement on that northern parcel.
Okay, so yeah.
So either way, we need, that's one of the conditions that we have, that second easement,
Yeah.
that second.
Got the ability to access it for an emergency situation.
And just to let everyone know that kind of every option was explored, because the end of the public right-of-way for Abbey Lane ends here. There was even some talks about why, when this was developed, why this didn't go out to the dirt road. And
Yes, there was.
there was a conversation that I believe, we didn't have a written record of it, but just talking with the legacy people that were involved in this. At the time, the thinking was they didn't wanna spit that much traffic out onto a dirt road, because it would've made the dirt road hard to maintain. So that's what kind of forced the road commission's hand in having to give a deviation of standards, cause this is kind of a road network of their own making. So, that's where we landed on that, and that's kinda where we're at right now. That's not to say that that's good or bad, but that's where we're at.
So if there's, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I sympathize with the utopian vision of adhering to the planning commission or the ordinance.
Utopian? Like, the utopian vision of adhering to laws?
Well,
I mean, that's very.
it is, even
Presidential
if
of you.
we approve this, I feel it's still adhering to what's written in there. Because what's written in there grants the leeway to make interpretations on a case-by-case basis, it sounds like. I do think that as we go through our, comprehensive planning process and give or create situations where all the different boards and groups are kind of headed in the same direction and moving together, I think that will, I can see the planning commission becoming more and more stringent with these things as we go forward.
Yeah, one thing, we talk about this more later, but one of the reasons we got the grant for the, comprehensive plan is to explore housing. I mean, our lot coverage calculation, we have more than enough, space to meet our lot coverage calculation.
Yeah, I would just agree with, we have had many discussions about the amenities, being lack, and I understand the 55 and over thing. But I just don't wanna move it forward without making sure that we address if there is some walkway or pathway or something. So if we had a path from the main road, then that would be going on to private, and, you know, nobody wants.
It's probably worth mentioning too, that, speaking of amenities and dwelling units and all that, just in case it slipped memory, cause we have been talking about this for a while, that we have spoken with the developer about one of the units being the office. That way there's on-site staff, so you gotta take that into account too. Again, not saying that's good or bad, I'm just trying to have full information here.
Right.
Is that one of the requirements of the conditions?
It is. It's spelled out in the plans that we've received.
The reason I brought that up is because we've had another development where, just
Yeah.
right up there on the corner where we've had the kids playing in the trees and stuff, and
Yeah, there's no on-site management.
no on-site, yeah.
Yeah, that can be an issue in some cases. The only comment I've got is there's several conditions here that if you're gonna send this out for bid, I'd be really skeptical of doing so, because there's gonna be a lot of change orders, and change orders are very expensive normally.
You guys are my first approval process.
Yeah, so. Mark, you had
On
something?
another subject, in the tertiary, talking about the sewer, is only 10 feet away from the building, the front wall of the buildings, and 6 to 8 feet deep, which is difficult for Skooma Township and impactful to the residents. Did that get solved?
believe we solved all of SCUMA's, comments.
And again, a lot of those agency reviews, you know, or a lot of those agency standards, we can hammer those out during the civil set, which we have conditions for all the engineering agencies to ultimately approve the civil set. And like I said before, if SCUMA sees something that isn't gonna meet their standard, it ain't gonna fly regardless of what happens tonight.
Okay. Because the next line talks about the landscaping plan putting trees over the sanitary sewer.
Yeah.
Those will have to be moved.
Yeah.
But those are the minor details that we can work with the engineer and move that tree 6 feet, you know, that's not something that
Right.
traditionally you would get hung up at a planning commission
No.
talking about should this tree be 6 feet north or south?
Yeah, I don't wanna get down that road.
We've talked about both. Are these gonna be private roads or public roads? Private.
Right. But there is right of way for the SCUMA people to operate in there.
Yeah, we'll gain all the easements for all the utilities.
I thought these were not gonna be roads.
Yeah, I don't like that, I don't like
yeah.
calling those,
They're
but
drives.
Interior drives is the
Interior
correct
drives.
term.
Yeah, they're
I'm not
private,
trying
yeah.
to critique everyone on the words
Yeah,
they use.
yeah, these are interior private
But
drives,
that's a good point.
Yep.
maintained by the owner.
Again, similar to, if you look again, just at a similar product here, you can see the layout of how this looks on versus this, which is a different product.
Absolutely.
Where
It's a
I-
different community.
Yeah,
too.
different community,
rules,
different,
Goals and objectives.
yeah,
So if we'll have
serving a
sidewalks.
different demographic as well.
Those don't have sidewalks?
I don't believe so.
No, the
No,
ones
they
that I
don't.
just looked at, they don't.
And the
This-
Falcon?
The one that we're reviewing does. Sorry. for
This
the
does.
confusion.
Golf course.
Yeah, they do have a golf
They
course.
do have a golf course.
Probably room on the front to put a putt putt in.
But some of these back units have a very nice view of a wooded area too, so,
Yeah.
you know. Alright, so at this point though, I am, if no zoning interpretation is requested of us, which again, we're more than happy to give. Other than that, the planning department has done a full agency review and then 3 rounds of engineering
Yep.
reviews. We've got our staff report built out, our conditions recommended, so we're at the point where our review's been completed.
Yeah, I think we need to either scuttle this or move it forward, gentlemen. Somebody wanna make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve this with the recommendations of the planning department.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kate.
Alright,
Miles, we're gonna take a roll call.
wanna do a roll call? Sounds good. Alright, Commissioner Crainer,
Yes.
Chair Wright,
Yes.
Trustee Hagerman,
Yes?
Commissioner Severie,
Yes.
Commissioner Almarigi,
No.
Commissioner, or Vice Chair Baker,
Yes.
and Commissioner Coulter.
Yes.
Alright,
Did he ask you?
Yes. That was the second one.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
Sam,
you.
I'll get with you tomorrow and we'll talk about moving to the board next.
Okay, cool,
Alright,
thank you.
Okay, let's move on. I think the next thing is the senior center report.
Yes.
Miles, you wanna give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, and, I wanna thank first off, I guess a special shout out to Commissioner Crainer for volunteering his time and sitting down with us and showing us kind of how in his industry they calculate, kind of market rates for meals. A couple of different factors that we talked about, which was helpful for us. And I just wanna say, you know, it's always great, and I feel very lucky to work in this position, because between, you know, people like yourself, Chair, and Commissioner Crainer, and Commissioner Almarigi, we get as much from you guys on learning how to evaluate different things as I hope we're able to give, so it's a team effort. So with that being said, basically, long story short, we came in by our method at like $17 and some change for market rate of meals. By his method, we came in at $12.60. I had, our other planning intern, Bobby, confirm that we did the math the right way. He said that you signed off on it, so if we're wrong, I guess let me know, but I hope we're not. So that was kind of the only major change I think we made to the report at this point. Obviously, the senior center is of great interest in the township, and because we kinda went public with this report, and, this is a small township, and people love to talk, I've had a lot of phone calls from various people about it, and we were at a event, where I had some people from DeWitt Township come up and just knowing that we're looking at this, say, hey, we can't tell you how much we like the senior center, blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, people have been talking about it, which is always good. I think at this point though, again, just kinda like the last item, we got our report. We feel like we made some good recommendations, possibly stirred the pot a little bit, but, you know, that's how she goes. And, we're kinda at the point where I guess we're putting it back to the planning commission on if you guys, if it's your pleasure, if you'd like to give some recommendations to the board, you know, I think that would be good. If you'd like for us to analyze something more, or, come up with something different, we can of course do that. We felt like we tried to spell a good set of recommendations. There has been some dialogue that I should probably mention, I'm trying to think about how to word this best, where, and we even talked about it internally here, like, what was the board actually looking for? And then I've had some board members even be like, well, what are we, like, this is a big report, man, like, what are you guys doing? And so, I did get a little bit of pushback on like, Miles, what are you doing? And they said, well, we wanted you, we wanted you to look at parking, we want answers to this question of the expansion of the center. And to that, I always push back, and I think you guys will understand this more than most out there. Planning's like all encompassing, and it's like interrelated. So you can't look at parking, in my mind at least, if you don't look at the factors that go into parking, like who are you serving, what's the demand, what's the capacity of the place, what's the type of user ultimately, and then, like what are their habits?
Yep.
So we tried to look at everything and tried to come up with a comprehensive response, because Judy and Co, I guess, like you're not wrong, if you go out there at noon on a Wednesday for lunch, is there a parking issue? Yeah, there's a lot of people in the parking lot. We had auditors here this week, and there's a parking issue for township employees. I couldn't find a spot earlier today in the front, so I had to park down here. And then if somebody wanted to get lunch that day, that means I'm parking. There was some confusion, I will say, and it wasn't intentional about, so I just wanna clarify in a public meeting about this, image here. We had to make some kind of determination too on like, when we're evaluating this, we had to make some kind of way of saying like, okay, what is the actual parking for seniors within this? And so the phrasing we used within our report was typical senior center parking or typical police parking. I did hear some comments about, well, they're saying that, there's 11 spots for DPW and those are DPW spots. That's not what we're saying. If you go out there, there's no signage that says like DPW only parking. We just needed to come up with some rational way to interpret like, these are the sectors in the township where typically parking within these users is happening. And that's kinda just a build out of what I hope the board will be looking at with their strategic plan, which is like, I don't think there was any planning that went into this. I think they were like, hey, we have space for some spots, get the asphalt truck out here, put some lines on the ground, let's get those spots rolling.
Yep.
And now we're at the point where it has caused some confusion, and the township is, since the early 2000s, doubled in population, and the areas around us, DeWitt has ballooned in population, and here we are. So to that end, what I gathered from my conversations over the last 2 weeks, what it sounds like to me at least, and I'm in the realm of opinion, so I could be wrong here, the board is ultimately looking for given the pot that we've stirred here, or I've stirred here, I don't know, is a recommendation on what to do in terms of parking. So answering that initial question, do we need a parking survey? Yes, no, maybe, you know, that can, those are, I think all those answers would suffice. The question of, is there any other policy options that could help us improve our parking situation? Which we've talked at length about policy options, I think that's really where the bulk of the discussion has gone. But again, that's on this body to recommend. And then ultimately, I think there was some confusion too, and I think it could be helpful for the board to know, because we kinda opened a can of worms here, whether intentionally or unintentionally on my part, are we recommending an expansion of the parking lot? Are we recommending an expansion of the senior center? Just because I've heard so much of that be brought up, I think if that's not what this body is recommending, that wasn't that's not what I gathered. Creating clarification for the board there. So answering those four things, like parking study, yes or no? Policy prescriptions, what do you guys think could work or what is not working? And then expansion to the parking lot, yes or no? Expansion to the center, yes or no?
I will take a lot of ownership of this. Miles and I have had a number of conversations about this, so the direction he headed in is not totally on his own. He and I have discussed this a great issue. As far as the parking, I think that you can come up with any conclusion you want depending on how you want to evaluate the parking. There are sufficient spaces based on our ordinance for a sit-down restaurant for people to park, assuming it was a sit-down restaurant. So is it in compliance with the ordinance? Yes. I don't think we could dispute that, can we, Miles?
No, I think that'd be a fair interpretation.
Now,
But
if you were going to expand the senior center, would there be a need for more parking? Definitely. If you're gonna expand a restaurant, you're gonna have to have more spaces for people to park.
More users, more spaces.
More users, more space.
Yeah.
One of the things that this report and the data that we found, and I did not see this coming, is that 60% of the people that eat regularly at the senior center are not Bath residents.
I think it's less than that, but it's roughly half.
It's real close. It's
Yeah.
higher than 50%.
I think it's just under 50%, but it's roughly half.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was right, 56 or 57%. So, and I did not see that coming, so, you know, I think, and the other thing that is interesting to me is, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's about 46 people that are regulars, is that correct?
I don't know if I got into regulars, I don't know if I can speak
Is
to
that
that.
about correct, Judy? I think it is.
46 people that are always there? Is
Yeah.
that what you said?
Yes,
Yeah, there, a lot of the same people come, yeah.
yeah.
How many total meals in a year were?
It's like 11,000 something.
So and if you think about half of those are from out of the area, that means that there's about less than 25 people that regularly attend the senior center out of the seniors in Bath, so.
So that's about, what, $35,000 of Bath taxpayer dollars that are going to feed non-residents?
I didn't do the numbers on that.
I did.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you could probably give or take depending on how you look at it, but
Yeah,
something like that.
that was using Craner's $12.
Yeah.
With the assumption that they're offsetting that by $5.
Sure.
I guess one of the things that you could do is you could suggest that we go to DeWitt and some of the other outlying communities that have people coming to Bath Senior Center and ask them if they would be willing to subsidize the senior center. In which case, then we wouldn't have to charge the people that don't live in the community a higher rate. The other position you could do, is you could say, gee, if you're not a Bath resident, I mean, if go to the zoo at Potter Park and you're not a resident of Ingham County, I think you pay, what is it, $10 or $15 to get in?
Same with the libraries.
Same with the library,
Same with the aquatic center.
the aquatic center.
So you assuming a policy?
Well, I'm not making any assumptions, Jason, I'm just throwing out some ideas here.
For recommendations.
For recommendations, and I think there's groups of people that we need to support that are low income, or that are handicapped, or that have special needs.
I
Go ahead.
think
You're
there's
welcome to
another
interrupt.
point there.
Go ahead.
This is a program that brings seniors together. And so it's more than just feeding them.
Oh, yeah, it's
That
socializing.
socialization is huge.
Yep,
Part of the program that the trustees in evaluation need to look at is it a good program for the seniors of this community to have this program in effect? Do I, as a taxpayer, like 50% of the people not being part of our community, but we're bringing people in? So I'll give a little, but I'm looking for a little support. Unfortunately, DeWitt doesn't have senior center. They have Meals on Wheels. We could add Meals on Wheels and drop the program, but I think we're losing something if we were to do that. That's my opinion. So somewhere in between, there's got to be something that can be worked out. But right now, I believe we've got a great program going there. I really, truly do. When I had lunch there watching the card players to just the interactions, that was the important part to me. The meal was very good also.
so I think to address the issue is, yes, we got a lot deeper into this than just the parking. And the reason was, we wanted to figure out if there was a parking problem and why it was occurring. And would expanding the center, which was one of the things that came up in that discussion of kicking this to the planning commission, was there a merit in expanding the senior center? And if so, then that's a whole nother issue of parking. No, there would not be adequate parking, nor is there adequate space to expand the senior center and the present site. And so that's another issue that we did not address. But I think this is more of a report for information for the Board of Trustees to take a good long look at and see how this fits into the long-range plan of Bath Township.
I think it was wise to be so comprehensive in the plan and go
Well,
beyond,
thank
because
you.
I think that in the discussion of the initial question, it would naturally lead to further questions, which
Yes, it
have
did.
already been answered, and really, I think, saves time in the whole long run of this process, instead of the board saying, well, we want to know about meals, and what does it actually cost? You know, I can see all of those things being raised as questions, and it's nice to have the answers, to have a more complete and thorough discussion
Thank you.
on the board.
Can I ask?
Absolutely, George. Go ahead.
What would be, because they're looking for recommendations from what I understand, correct? So they want specific recommendations. Can I hear some from anyone?
Well, I think the recommendation, if you look at this whole complex, if you want to expand the senior center, which is maybe not a bad idea, but then you're going to expand parking, how are you going to fit it on this site? And so I think we need to look at the whole site, not just the senior center. Because as the township grows, this office here is probably not going to be big enough to handle the township staff. So what are we going to do? And I think we need to look out, 10 years in the future and say, what's this site going to look like in 10 years, or need to look like in 10 years or 20 years or whatever, and let's start planning for it now.
I think
To just expand the senior center without looking at everything else, that just continues how Bath has grown in the past. It's just piece by piece, and it doesn't work.
So just to verbalize that in a recommendation that we can put down here, because that's the one that we have talked about in the past, so something, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Severie, so would it be okay to phrase that something along the lines of like, the planning commission is recommending that the board of trustees seek a campus analysis / study to understand how the whole campus is working together?
How it's working, and how it's going to need to grow in the future. That's the key thing, is how
To
do
plan
how
for
do we want it to
future
grow?
expansion and growth as a campus.
Yeah, not just the senior, but the whole campus.
And,
Okay.
and to address the to try to plan for a future.
We'll try to wordsmith that a little bit, but yeah, I think we got the gist of what that recommendation looks like.
Not just to look at it, but think of how can we fix it.
The original
Not
question
just-
was,
not to
do we
find it.
need to commission a parking study? And I
Yeah.
think
What's the answer to that?
the answer is no.
No.
I think
Because I don't think we would gain any more information than what's in this report. We would find out, yeah, there's a lot of people trying to park at lunchtime. And I think we already know that.
Yes,
That's the consensus of the planning commission, largely.
that's I agree with
Okay.
her.
We're trying to get recommendations down on paper here.
I think your map was great though, as far as identifying what's what, it's kind of logical.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, do we want to bring up the topic of pricing for Bath residents versus non-residents?
So some type of,
Sort of a policy on that, because you're right, at least, Groesbeck Golf Course, if you're a resident, you pay one fee, if you're not a resident, you pay more.
I think that's
That's a city of Lansing, but
I agree with you in total, Ray, and I think that's an issue for the Board of Trustees to address. I don't know that as a planning commissioner, I feel comfortable.
no, I
Dealing with
don't
that.
think so.
I don't think it necessarily needs to cover everything either, just, little.
But I think that they should have this information, and then they can use this information to base a decision, or come back to us and say, we need more information.
So could you keep that recommendation, and I'm just trying to get a sense here, to it again. Could you keep that recommendation something, we talk about specifics, but that we're specifically tackling an issue, but keeping it broad enough so the board can still do what they do and not, we don't
Right.
infringe on that? Could you keep it something along the lines like, the planning commission recommends the board of trustee analyze, meal pricing? Just end it right there. Just, and then
Pretty
they-
general.
Don't suggest.
you don't have to, you don't have, you can
compensation.
do whatever you want, I'm just offering.
Yeah.
But just
I
not
don't-
give them a suggestion, just say, hey, we think you should look at this.
I think the board's
think
gonna
that's
gonna be faced with looking at that
Yeah,
when they
I
read
think
the
so, too.
report. I think that they don't have any choice.
But I
They're
think if
gonna-
you want them to look at that, then you should tell them to look at that.
Well, I don't have any problem with that. And that's something maybe we can just rely on Kate to discuss that with them.
That would be
If
fine
you,
too.
if you wanna make would you feel more comfortable if we made
Well,
a recommendation?
in my opinion, I think it's fairly obvious in reading through the summary, but I wouldn't dissuade you from making such a statement in your recommendations paragraph.
The other recommendation is to look at putting, and I'm going to say 3 15-minute parking spaces at the door for the to-go meals.
Like to go only parking
Yes,
spaces.
to go on those days.
Okay, so,
Because it's only in that period that is allowed that to-go happens, and that's 11:30 to noon.
Beg your pardon?
To-go meals, they can pick them up starting at 11:30.
11:45 till 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
okay, so, just because, again, we're getting a list here. So on that first point, pricing, do we wanna include it, or we wanna have Kate talk about it?
No, let's include it.
I think you should include it.
I do too.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead. Judy, would you mind stepping up to the podium? So we're only gonna have the mic to do any minutes for the meeting, so.
First, I want to say that this is a very valuable report. The information contained in it is incredible, and much more than we anticipated when we asked if we expand the building, or add an addition, is there space out there for a few more parking places? But my concern on page 15, that first full paragraph, and I don't mean to nitpick, but it seems like you've taken the salaries and the benefits and the wages, operating supplies, inflation, food expenses, mileage reimbursement, and you come out with a price of $4.66, and then you go on to say, adding the labor cost, $86,565, plus the benefits, $6,795, which it seems to me is added at the very beginning where it says salary and benefits. I just wonder if you didn't put that in there twice.
No, I don't
And
think so.
that is
No.
what is causing that increase there. From what we understood the price of the meal to be about $5, which is why we charge $5.
Well, and
No.
And then,
Can he respond to that?
Judy,
think-
we've walked through that, and
I'm
I
sorry.
don't believe the meal cost for food is $4.66. That is there. I really wanted to just show what the food cost.
Right,
And then, when you bring the labor cost in, what it then does.
So we
Because
might
the intent,
We're just restating ourselves on that paragraph, but
Yeah.
that's not how it was calculated.
and trying to make it so that when the trustees see it, the labor cost would be there if we served 20 meals, 30 meals. It wouldn't make any difference, but that's part of the program that they are saying is good. So I didn't want that to be confused with the cost of the meal.
right, so when at the beginning it says, the final cost estimate includes salaries and benefits,
That's just us,
wages and benefits?
that's on us, Mark, we restated ourselves. We
Okay.
shouldn't have put that in there in that first sentence.
So you're not
No.
counting
so-
those twice, that's what
We're
it
not.
just always confusing to
It
me.
is confusing, I agree. It's confusing, but that's not what's happening. The $4 and something cents is the food cost alone, and then when you add wages and benefits, and that's what obviously spikes the price.
And then you come up with a total of $7.86.
We came up with a total of, by Mark's method, $12.64.
The two costs, the labor costs at $7.98 and the $4.66 for food.
So those, the $7.98 are the labor costs. And the
Yeah.
$4.60 some
Yeah.
cents is the food cost. So you're adding the $4 and the
Plus the
$7, and you're coming up with 12.
Yeah,
Could we restate that before we send this to the board?
yeah, we can work on it.
Maybe columns?
I'm not gonna get crazy with it, I'll clean it up.
But if we could just clear that, make that a little bit
Yeah,
clearer, I would
it's in-
greatly,
it's
like,
inherently
greatly appreciate it. I just think it's so important that the information be clear for the trustees. I just feel that way.
To make it very, we used last year's numbers, and that's why that section's there, is where did we draw that number from?
Right,
Oh,
the number of meals that we sold in 2024.
She wanted to
Yeah, I
talk to
see
us.
that. And then I would just comment on page 16, where it said, food expenses alone is $49,120, and the revenue received from the meals totaled the amount of $47,815. From this, it becomes clear that the revenue gained from selling meals doesn't even cover the full cost of food supplies. Well, we sold 12,000 meals, and the difference is about $1,000 between the food expense and what we've recovered at the door. So I think that that following statement is just a little bit bold.
I mean, it's true.
But this is a great report, and the information is really important, and I greatly appreciate your helping us with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay, so going back, I think so far where we just left off was, we've got, I still didn't get clear guidance on
Expansion.
we'll get there, hopefully. Analyzing meal prices, it sounds like Kate and the chair are in favor of just saying to the board, hey, we think you need to look at this. Which again, the board could look at and say, no, we're all set here.
Yep, yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay, so we got consensus on that,
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Do we wanna highlight that part of the reason of looking at that is that might affect parking rates?
yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
What
I just don't
statement?
know if that would be obvious.
Well, I think
That's-
ultimately the question was, parking's a problem, how can we solve it? Like, what can we do?
Right.
And I think that that's part of what this report is what you can do is based on these factors. And so, yeah,
Okay, so to Commissioner Almaridge's point, where I think you guys are speaking the same thing. So, to your point, so we'll include, we believe the Board of Trustees should analyze pricing, and then you want comma.
Well, I mean, it's a question, I mean, do we wanna highlight, there's, changes to the price of the meals may have an economic impact that would affect parking.
Okay. Is everyone in agreement that comma,
Yeah.
saying that statement? Okay. And then the next one, Commissioner Crainer brought up, the suggestion to allot, the number you went with was 3 dedicated spots for to-go meals.
Yeah, just to, again, it's a number to start with, because I believe that will help with that. It's one of the concerns, because those parking spaces could be taken up by the people that come in early, playing cards and so forth, and then the closest parking space for to-go meals is down the hill.
Why do they have to be close if they're to go?
Because they're coming in and getting out of the food hot.
Yeah, but they can come in and walk from any parking space to go in to the, you know what I'm saying? I'm asking.
Yeah,
And then if they go in there and then they start talking, then that space is being held up anyways. So I'm just trying to get a grasp on that. So if you set a limit for 15 minutes, let's say, only have a 45-minute window, then you can get.
They only have a 15-minute window.
Oh, okay.
Most of the people who come to pick up their meals park in front of the police station or down in the main parking lot.
Okay.
They want the exercise. I see a lot of people who pick up the meals who park down here in the main parking lot, because it's a chance for them to walk from their car out to the center and back to the parking lot. I don't think it's necessary to have a 15-minute pickup spot there.
No, I'm just wondering but you do justify having a pickup, you think that would be helpful to have a pickup spot?
Well, there are really kind of 2 pickup spots already. There's a broad opening in front of the main door that's marked, slashed.
Right?
It's primarily for entrance, but I know it's for emergency vehicles. That's why it's there. So a lot of times people pull in there, pick up their meal and go out. And then on the other side of the building, across from DPW, there's also an empty spot that's striped. Again, it's for, I think, emergency purposes.
For pedestrians.
But people come into that extra spot there, it's big enough for a car. They come in there, stop momentarily, pick up their lunch and leave.
So they're parking in spots that we're not even counting.
Right, so that would be it would be justified to have a couple to-go spots, right?
It's no different than if you go to a restaurant, you want quick access to get in and get out, and most restaurants have reserved spots for that purpose, and that's where my mind, the processing came from.
I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah. That's a bold move to park illegally right in front of the police station.
It's Bath.
Alright, so, consensus then on suggesting the board at least, and again, none of this, you're not saying like there shall be 3 spots, you're
Right.
saying, hey, this is something you could take a look at.
Yeah, and see if it helps.
Yeah.
Where, at least a majority feel that way? Okay, okay, so now we still haven't answered the question though, of expansion of senior center, yea or nay?
I don't think that we were asked to reevaluate that.
We weren't, but his point about looking at the campus and the future needs, that would be a part of that
Okay, so maybe we'll
conversation.
build a caveat to that statement, which was the first one, which was, the planning commission recommends the board of trustees seek analysis of the entire campus on which the senior center rests and, the site's, future, expansion.
Yeah, because that's,
And we can-
these offices, the police department, the fire department, DPW, all need to be reviewed.
So just to provide clarity to the board though, we could say something like, comma, the planning commission doesn't think any, structure on the campus should expand until a campus analysis has been conducted.
Yep,
Just so we're not singling out the senior
Correct.
center.
correct.
So, I'm a bit confused as to what the campus analysis is going to yield.
I think I am curious about that too, but again, I don't think similar to this study, I don't think you could possibly know what it's gonna yield until you do the dive in. The campus analysis study, I think could range anywhere from, here are 10 ways to more efficiently use your campus, to if the staff of this township is to truly, and the need for facilities is to double in the next 40 years that we're projecting, you might wanna just start looking for a different site.
Or go vertical.
Or go vertical, or something like that. But that's what I think the campus analysis will ultimately determine.
And who does that?
That is for the board to decide, but there are a number of, that's for the board to decide.
No, I know, they'll kick it back to us.
Again, I hope they don't,
I hope they don't.
I hope they don't, I hope they would bring on a firm, like even some of the ones that we interviewed this week that have, kind of interdisciplinary, industries all in one firm, where they have civil engineers, planners, landscape architects, they can bring a whole team and say, hey, how can we more efficiently use this place, what are some options?
Yeah, I'm still not clear what that analysis will yield, because, I mean, the two main factors are going to be, what is our population growth gonna look like? We already know that, right? And so we've got modest growth, right? And then what's our SCV? And that's based on all the moderate income housing that we're gonna start putting in, overpacking in parcels. So that will dictate the income that the township has for the services that's gonna provide.
Yeah, the tax base, sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, don't we have enough to say that we anticipate, I mean, we have like how many staff members per capita, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just know, again, this is anecdotal, but I know like in our offices, even this week was a good example of trying, we're out of space. And that's something that a lot of departments feel. That's something that the fire department feels down on theirs, that's something that we feel in our office. That's something that the senior center feels, is space is at a premium. But that's why I feel like a campus analysis, if anything, could yield, I think it's useful. I think the board's exploring a strategic plan. I think campus analysis could be part of that plan.
Instead of doing senior center, police department, DPW separately, everybody come in, look at the whole.
No, I get that. What a consulting firm is gonna say is, you don't have enough property unless you go vertical.
There you
So
go.
either tear down the DPW building, build something newer, out on the fringe, and then build a 4-story building right there.
Yeah.
And then where are you gonna park? Gonna have to build a parking ramp?
Yeah, five-story parking ramp, where you do like the first 3 floors. I mean,
But I
Put
got,
housing on the first floor,
so I'm just gonna order to go.
what's that?
I'm just gonna order to go then.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, yes, but I don't know if the township board is gonna go for like a campus study,
Right.
to say the obvious.
Right, it's very obvious.
Okay, but I think we still got, it sounds like we still at least have consensus on that one. We'll do the caveat to cover the expansion question,
Yeah,
cause I think they want an answer to that.
It would be nice to have some relatively quick feedback from them, so that when we're doing our comprehensive plan, we can kinda incorporate that too. So-
That's a good point, and Kate, maybe when this goes to the board, we can, I don't think that needs to be a recommendation, cause that kinda
No,
outside of
I
purview,
just
but that
wanted
would
to
be
bring it
good to
up.
mention, hey, we just wanna make sure our thinking aligns with what you guys' ultimate goals are, so even offline, if you could provide us some feedback, or it could be formal feedback, through via Kate. That way, when we are, to your point, coming up with goals and priorities during the comp plan, we're not like way off base.
And we'll build a comp plan and then not plan for expansion.
Okay. And then, we don't have it, we did answer the parking
Is it
study
five?
question, I
It's a
said no.
5-year plan, right?
Okay, so those are,
yes,
25?
no, 5.
It's the comprehensive plan is a 20-year plan that's renewed every 5 years, right?
yes.
Okay.
And it, and
But it's a
we're-
5-year plan.
But it's a 20-year plan.
It's a
It's
20-year
renewed 5 years, every
Yes.
5
It's a
years.
20-year
Well,
plan.
okay, all
And
right.
renew can also mean update, you
Yeah.
know, so like some communities will just minor updates every 5 years, but we have the privilege of being able to
Right,
give this thing a fresh look, which I think it desperately needs.
yeah.
Okay, so at least by our list here, we have an answer to a lot of the questions I felt like were, at least initially asked.
So what will the statement be for the expansion?
The statement will be that the expansion, the planning commission isn't recommending an expansion to any facility, either structure or parking until a campus analysis is conducted. And again, the board, within the board's purview, they could come back and say, no, we don't like that, we'd like you to hone in on this one issue, yes or no? So that's within their purview.
Yep.
And the thing, in this campus analysis, if they actually did it, they need to take a look at the functionality of the buildings, and it's like the senior center could be used for more than just a senior center, but it's not, you know, there are times of the day when maybe the seniors aren't there, can it be used at night for something else?
Yeah, that's why I feel like it would be useful, cause I think there would be some creative options that might come out of that. I feel like there's probably also gonna be options to Commissioner Reggie's point, which is, you gotta go up or you gotta go out.
Yeah.
Is there, I don't wanna go down a rabbit trail, so I'll make this, can you use the senior center now for activities? Like if I wanted to have some type of class, art class?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you can
The
rent it.
senior center is open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 4.
Okay,
It's available Tuesdays and Thursdays. We use the facility on Tuesday afternoons and Thursday afternoons for euchre.
okay.
But you
That
can.
that
rent
answers my question, so thank
The facility in the
you.
morning if you want.
Okay, thank you.
The Lions use it every Thursday night for a meeting, I mean, yeah.
I've been to events there on the weekends.
Okay,
Also.
thank you.
Alright, anything else that the planning commission would like us to include when we write this up? And I guess I can talk to the chair about what form you'd like this to take to the board, we could do a memo form. However, we can discuss that on how you'd like us to provide this.
Yeah. Miles, I didn't see in here, and maybe I missed it, is there any data as to how many seniors out of the seniors in Bath Township actually regularly utilize the senior center?
You know, like a percentage breakdown, we didn't look into that.
Do we have any data that we can use? No, you're shaking your head, we don't?
I mean, he squeezed as much as he could estimate from the available data.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just kinda curious, cause if there's 46 or 45 people regularly going, and even half of them are from out of the township, that means there's only, what, 25 people or less
That's the
that are
thing with like,
Bath seniors that are using the senior center.
you would have to be making some assumptions though with that interpretation, so I don't know if it would be statistically significant, or it'd
Yeah.
be something that would think you wanna base a recommendation on, cause it's
Yeah.
just,
Okay.
but if you think it's useful.
Well, no, I was just kinda curious.
I mean, maybe there's a policy recommendation about better data collection practices and to inform future decision-making on senior centers, so things like, you know,
That would be nice.
ID scanning or something that would,
How do you, well, yeah, cause you gotta balance it against like, but yeah, I think that's good, so what would that recommendation look like how should we word that?
I mean, in terms of like, if you were to structure this in terms of, you know, parking and then policy considerations, you know, what policy consideration is, you know, analyzing, looking at the cost of meals, looking at, the residency versus non-residency issue, and then, you know, institute some policies on better record keeping, in terms of patronage.
So the recommendation would say, the board could analyze, the planning commission is suggesting that the board of trustees analyze the record-keeping policies of this program in order to better make
Track
policy.
who's utilizing the service and how often.
Yeah,
Who's
and
utilizing service analysis,
Just look at data collection.
Yeah.
Data collection would probably be,
with the goal of helping policymakers be better informed moving forward.
Yep, great.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of benefits. One is that, you know, you have an idea of better where more outreach is needed, because perhaps you're not, you know, reaching residents in certain districts of our community. I mean, there's,
Yeah, it's huge.
That's a
Okay.
good point.
Okay, so we added that one, so now we're at 5 recommendations total.
Once this 55 and up development opens across the street, watch out.
Yeah.
They can all walk to the
Yeah.
senior center.
And get their exercise.
Maybe extra parking.
It's not a bad thing, walkable community, that's great.
really great.
Welcome communities, yep.
Okay,
Okay, is everybody good with that? Do you wanna look at this again before we send it to the board?
I don't think so.
No? Okay,
All right, well, we'll type up
You
the
and I
memo
will-
and regardless, Chair, we'll at least have you and the Vice Chair check it over before we send it out.
that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the sewer tap fee then. And this is something that Miles and I and Mr. Commissioner Severie and I worked on, and some of the staff. And the first thing that became real obvious to us, gentlemen, is that we bought a number of REUs from Watertown Township, and we paid more for them than we charge here for the tap-in fee. So we are paying people a significant amount of money to hook up to our sewer for some reason. And that became real evident right in the beginning. And as we delved into this deeper, we found out that we have a limited amount of data as to what the actual capital cost of our system is, which is normally what sewer tap-in fees are based on. And that also developed into the fact that we have a number of areas of the sewer which expansion is totally limited as far as to how many people could tap into it. And we have other areas that are way underutilized, but we don't know to what extent because the data is not available. So this report is kind of a stopgap, and I'm treading on your
Yeah.
chair, Miles, but I own this report in a way. And I want the planning commission to own it. We're gonna recommend to the township board that there be a significant increase in the tap-in fee immediately, and then that we delve into this much deeper, and especially in light of the fact that we are buying more plant capacity over in DeWitt, which should be covered by the sewer tap-in fee. And I don't know, Ray, if you want to chime in, but we don't feel confident doing this ourselves. We think you should hire an engineering firm to make a complete study of what our costs actually are.
So who's the "we" that's making the recommendation?
The planning commission.
So don't we need to vote on that?
Yes, we do, but I'm just saying that I would like to have your support on this. It was dealt to me by Ryan. He said, I would like to have you guys do this. It was about 1.5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And we've kicked it around for a long time and trying to get more data, but the deeper we read deep into it, the deeper we find out we don't know. So.
Cause it's its own fund, correct?
There are two funds in the sewer world. There's the tap-in fee fund and there's the user processing
RUs.
fee.
The RU, per RU.
The rates, sewer
Yes.
rates.
Sewer.
Or sewer rate.
But
Okay.
it's isolated from the general fund.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there are two pots of sewer money. And a system that's built out like East Lansing or Lansing has does not get new sewer tap-in fees. So all of the capital cost is borne by the processing fees, or the user fees, or whatever you wanna call them. Which is why you're seeing tremendous increases in some communities in user fees.
So if you don't have enough to cover your tap-in fees, you're actually subsidizing, right?
Correct.
You're having to pull out of the general fund. Chair, can I
Absolutely.
just talk about like where staff's at, and then I think
Yep,
in my
absolutely.
discussions with the chair, they had some amendments that I think he might ask, but, and again, so you guys' purview. The chair kinda laid it out, basically, my department, like we felt much more just with our skill sets as planners, almost like the analysis of the senior center was like much more up our alley than the analysis of like a large civil engineering system. We did our best with some of the methods that we talked about in the past to kind of like, build almost like a plot chart of where fees are at and tap in by a variety of methods that I think can all point us in a direction, but admittedly, ultimately, I don't think myself or the staff here are gonna have the ability to say like, the tap-in fee should be $7,138. Like I don't think I have that skill set to get this body to that number.
Based on,
Based upon just us analyzing the system and using the skill sets that planners are taught in planning school of how to
I
evaluate
meant
systems.
based on the tap-in, current tap-in rate and.
Yeah, but what we did do is we used a variety of methods that are spelled out in the report and we talked about in front of you guys. And we weren't able, with available data, to dive too much deeper into some of those methods. We've been talking about the housing one and its inadequacies, and then we looked to see if good housing data was available from the 70s and 80s. It was not, so then we had to go with what, in my view, is kind of subpar data just to get us in a ballpark figure. But what all the methods were kind of pointing to, and what the chair and the vice chair are alluding to with the subsidy is, we currently have a system in Bath Township where, and again, this is what a more built-out study could provide, and what I don't feel like this department is well tooled or has the time to analyze. But I think there's something like, I hope I'm not misspeaking here, something like $2 or $3 million in the sewer fund, most of which is locked up in CDs for investing through the trustee. Now, that's not to say there couldn't be a capital improvement project that comes along sewer base where it's planned out ahead, and then the trustee knows that they're not going to be able to reinvest in CDs over that time. But $2 million in sewer world is basically no money, because just to get everyone on the same page, the sewer upgrades that we're talking about on the Chandler corridor, and this is coupling with a road project, so it actually reduces the cost of this project by quite a bit, because the roads are already gonna be fully torn up and trenched, and we don't have to build that into the cost of our sewer project, but we're sitting at, looking at numbers anywhere between $5 and $7 million for that project. And that's not a huge stretch of project. Now, we're going with larger pipe sizes there, and we're talking about lift stations, so obviously, those numbers can get big quick. But with that being said, the only reason that the township's even considering that is by the grace of the powers that be. There was a $10 million line item in the state budget from on high that was given down to Bath Township, where we're able to have some funds to at least look at this stuff. That's not to say, even with that money, some of the money in the sewer expansion fund, there might still have to be bonding that takes place. I don't know, I had the pleasure of not having to worry about the finance side of everything that takes place in the township, and I don't wanna worry about that. But with that being said, it's become apparent through that project alone, but even some of the conversations where we got really far into the weeds with the Norm Fastener and seeing how sewer projects would work there, and starting to work out numbers and agreements, and looking at the cost of pipe, that the $3,000 tap-in fee that was established in 2006 just isn't covered. I mean, that was 19 years ago, and it hasn't been moved up. And so we looked at a variety of methods. What the chair talked about of where staff is at with this is, I'm gonna use a metaphor of like, we have a patient, the patient's bleeding out, the first thing you wanna do is like stop the bleeding, assess the breathing, right? And like medical 101. Triage, right? So, in order to stop the bleeding, we are recommending that, we go from a fee in the meantime of from $3,000 to $5,000, and this body can debate on whether they think that's a good number, a high or low. That's just, and how did we get to $5,000? We just picked out a number that seemed good and seemed higher than what we are now, that didn't seem too burdensome to what we compared to where other communities similar size to us are charging. And then we're also requesting that, or making the recommendation that right now go ahead, Chair.
Well, just a minute, we wanna factor in the fact that we paid Watertown Township for those REUs that was just plant capacity, not the cost to get it to the plant. And what did we pay for those?
Just over $5,000.
Yeah. That's just the plant. That does not count the cost to get it to the plant.
So then, yeah, good point, Chair. So there are reasons, but immediately I'm just trying to say where our faults lie. This isn't, again, I'm not like $5,000 is the end all be all
So
recommendation.
it isn't something though that we dug out of the sky.
Yeah, it's not something that just, fell into our lap. Then we are also tried to analyze what the staff time for a typical review, because when a builder comes in, they're building a new home, they wanna tap in, they don't actually pay $3,000, they pay $3,050. The 50 is the inspection that SCUMA and township staff administrate for ensuring that the sewer is up to par when they tap into our system. We don't want a house that has built an incorrect service line tapping into our system and then backfeeding happening, or air pockets happening. We're recommending that go up to $100. You can imagine what it costs to pay an engineer to get in a truck from the SCUMA facility, drive out to a site, and then drive back to the SCUMA facility, and then get on their computer, and then do the, plan review, and then send it back to us with a thumbs up. It doesn't cost $50.
Doesn't cost 100 either.
Costs more than 100.
Well, that one, we could probably dial in that number a little bit more, give or take where the site is, give or take if they have to do a reinspection, you know, there's some factors, but an engineer with benefits probably makes something like $70 an hour, somewhere
So,
around.
I mean, can't that just be built in terms of the fee will be $5,000 plus the actual expenses of the inspection?
Yeah, but then you gotta, again, that'd be nice, in the ideal world, I think, probably, but like, how do you factor that in every time? Like, do we just have SCUMA just send us a bill every time, and then their labor costs for projecting that?
Well, I mean, maybe look at the last year of what the actual fees were, and then take some metric of that, whether it's an average or it's something else, and you just build that in, use
No,
that.
and agree, and that's something where,
With
that's,
inflation increases.
and that's something where I hope our third suggestion comes into play, which is, there are things that need to be looked at, and those things need to be comprehensive and fully built out and justifiable to the taxpayer and the builders and future developers in the community. For that to happen, we feel like a, firm that specializes in this space, similar to the firm that the township hired to do the rate study. I know there was some thinking by Commissioner Severie that he would prefer an engineering firm to look at
So
it,
would I.
which is perfectly fine with us. But some firm that specializes in this space needs to review this topic and give a recommendation to the board. That's not something that, again, we will do anything within my ability or my department's ability to please the planning commission and board, but I just wanna be honest about where I think my skill set ends, and this is one of those areas.
What if we hire it out and it comes back and says, you should be charging $8,000 for a tap-in fee? Is the board of trustees going to be willing to go from $3,000 to $8,000?
Well,
I
I'm
can't
hoping if
answer
they
that.
listen to our recommendation, they would be going from $5,000 to $8,000, but I don't know, that's for the
That-
board to decide.
But it's at $3,000 right now, right?
Correct.
So,
But
3
if
to
they
5 to
listen to
8.
all three of our recommendations, in this world of mine where they just take what we're saying and they're like, okay, that sounds good for now. They'll move it up to 5,000 to stop that bleeding, and 100 to stop the bleeding, analyze the breathing, and then the breathing study comes back in this metaphor, and it says $8,000, and at that point, the board has a decision to make.
You okay?
I think the 5 is too low myself. I think it should be 6,500 now.
You're kind of looking at this, one of the analysis you did in the study was the value per REU. We know how many REUs we've got in the township, which is what, 40, and it changes every day, every time you add another house.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 4,500. Now, this number that you got from SCUMA as the value of the system of 59 million, I don't know where they got that number.
I asked Brad again, and this is not a comprehensive study, but I asked Brad to look into it, look at his most recent data and give us estimate on where it goes.
Yeah, and a consulting firm would actually look at stuff, and they'll list down what the plant's worth, what the replacement cost of every pump station we've got, what is the replacement cost of all the sewers, so you get how many feet of each type of sewer we've got, to come up with that value. If 59 million is right, then this computation says we should be charging 13,000.
I believe it.
So,
We better get it updated before those 80 units going across the street.
that's true. Gotta adopt it quick.
One, that's
like-
where the recommendation
That's
is,
$250,000 right there.
that's where the recommendation to stop the bleeding kinda comes into play.
Yeah. And the problem is that regardless of whether you're building a $4,000 house or a $3,000 house or $1 million house, the cost of the infrastructure is the same. So percentage-wise for the builder, you know, the sewer fee, no question, is a higher percentage for the lower cost homes. But costs just as much to build a road and a sewer, no matter what kind of home you're putting on it.
Same if it was a septic field.
This is a private road.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's the primary,
It
right.
would be bigger septic field.
But the sewer and the water main stuff are not, though. But,
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the same.
So I guess I wish I was able to give you guys an easier decision to make tonight. I know this is a hard one, given what we're discussing,
I
but
don't think it's hard.
I don't think
I
it's
will
hard.
say we just increased the regular sewer rates and the mobile home park sewer rates last night.
Didn't increase it very much. Is that, cause I know when this first came up, I asked if I could see a copy of the study, they weren't releasing that to anybody.
Yep.
Now, last night they approved the new sewer rate.
So now I think I can get you a copy of
I'd
the
like to see
study.
that.
Alright,
Because the firm that did this is an accounting firm, it's not an engineering firm, so I don't know,
Right.
they're good with numbers, but where'd they get their numbers?
I don't know.
But
I read it, I didn't understand it.
Did you understand?
I have a question, why are you not going higher on the
Yeah, on that,
inspection fees?
Yeah,
Because $100 to review a plan inspection, you know, it's just not there. You're not covering, because quite honestly, $100 an hour with benefits and wage,
one gas to get out to the site and maintaining a vehicle and all this.
yeah, plus the vehicles and all that, that's not, you're, again, subsidizing
You're saying you're stopping them bleeding with
the
a Band-Aid?
developer.
Again, we're just trying to be conservative in the recommendation we're making to this body. We're, again, admittedly saying this is not an end-all be-all recommendation.
but they're gonna look at it as doubling your rate, they're gonna see them.
Yeah, they're not gonna see everything you're talking about, but one thing to note here that, is important probably to point out, when we're thinking about the discussion we're having is rate increases affect your residents today, they affect Bath Township residents.
Right.
Tap-in increases affects future residents, they
Correct.
don't affect your current residents, so it's a much different, a much different fee in terms of the effect it has on the current township and then the future of the township. Cause the future of the township doesn't care what your rates are today, they care about where, you know, maybe what your rates are gonna be in the future. And that's another thing the board will ultimately have to weigh, if let's say some study is given and the study comes back and says 8,000 or 13,000, they also have to say Bath Township doesn't exist in a vacuum too, so if you get too far ahead of your skis on this one, could you actually be suppressing demand within the township for new development? So, yeah, and that's a decision
The
again, that,
fastest growing municipality in like 3 counties.
well, probably because we're priced pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, the thing is, the people who are gonna see this are the people building the new home, because when like when we bought the land and then we had a home built, that sewer fee connection is going to be in one of those prices, probably when you bought your land.
Probably.
That's where it's gonna be. But if somebody's building a $300,000 home and it costs them $10,000 for the sewer connection, that's a pretty small part of what they're building.
And another thing, again, I think we might have talked about this in the past, and I keep interjecting, but I'm just trying, again, for more information. You need to think about too, you know, Commissioner Severy is saying, hey, when I built my home, this is the experience I had, these are things I had to factor in. You also need to factor in that when people are looking to build homes in the township, we have lots of people come into our office and just sit down with me and the assessor and talk about where they wanna build a home, and they'll throw all kinds of stuff at us that they're thinking about. A big factor for people is if a sewer system is in play on a parcel they're looking at, that's huge for them, because what that means for them is they don't have to establish a septic field. And a septic field right now is, you know, $25,000, and if it's an engineered septic field, because the property won't perk, I mean, we're $45,000 for engineered septic field.
So a $13,000 tapping fee is already a savings, right?
Right.
Well, in the
You
short
can make-
term, I mean,
you can
you're
make that
paying
argument.
monthly and that adds up that you're not
Yeah.
paying for a
You
septic.
can make that argument, but again, with the septic field, that doesn't mean there's not regular maintenance that comes with the septic field as well.
It's like $200 every 10 years.
Yeah, sure.
It's not 200 anymore.
It depends on what's going on with your septic field.
It's not every
Hopefully-
10 years either.
Hopefully you get a good contractor that does it the right way.
Let's,
Depends how many girls you got now.
I think we should take a bite at this and see what would you like to do, gentlemen? You wanna move forward with the suggestions Miles has got, or do you have some other price point that you'd like to put in place, and let's get a motion. I think the tap-in should be 65 and the inspection should be 150 myself, but that's my personal opinion. I don't have any problem making that motion, but I don't think it's really proper for the chair to make motions. That's just my opinion also, so if you want me to make that motion, I will. I don't know if there'll be support
I'll make a
for it or
motion that we
not.
recommend increasing the tap-in fee to 6,000. That doubles it from 3, which is still low,
Yes, it is, Ray.
but,
So,
And would you address the inspection fee as well?
yeah, I think we should, yeah, I think the rate probably should go to 150. I would agree with
Are
that.
you making that motion?
Yes.
all right, I have some discussion points. Wait,
Yes,
wait,
could we
Let's
wait
discuss
for-
it.
Is there a second for Ray's motion?
Real quick, anything, Mr. Severie, on our third recommendation to study the issue?
Oh, yeah, you definitely need to have that in there too.
Okay.
Hire,
Well,
I'd say hire a consulting firm to study this issue and give us a formal recommendation.
I think we should separate those, Ray, if you don't mind.
However you guys wanna do it.
I'd like to address the
rates.
rates as a separate issue. Is there a second for Mr. Severie's motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
I-
No, we'll have some discussion.
Discussion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right.
So I think there's an advantage of putting it under 100% increase for the tap-in fee. And
Okay.
one of the strategies that you could do is to increase the tap-in fee by $1,000 every year until the completion of this sewer fee. I just think the optics of, you know, when the board goes to vote on this, that there's a 100% increase in sewer tap-in fees, people aren't gonna look at the details of that, they're gonna be like, what is the township doing? What is the governance of this township doing? So if it's under, you know, whatever, you know, 3 to 5, I think that has less poignancy in terms of what people are gonna latch on to. Now, but I think we can do a staged increase, and we're gonna have to do that, right? And so, say the sewers, I mean, going to Kate's concern, what if it is $12,000? You know, is the community gonna stomach that, or are they gonna be, you know? So, you know, one strategy is, well, yeah, we gotta get to that, but let's do it over 5 years.
I think 5 years is a little too
Who
long,
is,
but I
who
agree
is
with
the
what you're
tap-in
saying.
fee community though?
Yeah, it's
Our
not-
future neighbors.
Yeah, and they're not gonna, it's gonna be the developer, the
It's the
developers are the ones that
developers.
be concerned about it, not the future people.
It's the developers.
So,
The neighbors are concerned about the quarterly rates,
yeah.
but probably not so much the tap-in fee.
I would probably not like to go with the 6 and do a incremental, like maybe a $2,000 this year and $1,000 next, or something like that, maybe. But 6 doubling it does, or even lower it a little bit.
Well, Kate, you're the board rep, I mean, what do you think about the optics? If it's just
Well, I think we
developers-
just raised 2 sewer rates last night, so I feel that, anybody paying close enough attention would see what's coming down the road.
They're in the mood, you're saying.
I think as long as there's data to support that conclusion. I mean, just looking at the graph of the tap-in fees versus, the inflation, you can see that it's pretty out of whack. I think a lot of the things the Board of Trustees has done lately is trying to play catch-up from decisions that were made in the past that we now have to work through the financial repercussions of. Who is ultimately impacted by this? Well, ultimately, the home buyer, but in the short term, the developer. and I think the developer's probably better able to absorb it.
Will be the buyer.
Or pass it on.
Right, or pass it on, and then the home buyer knows what they're getting into.
My concern here is that, and Shammy, if I'm wrong, Ray, you're more experienced than I have with build-out communities. At some point, you run out of money for tap-ins because you don't have any more capacity in the system to sell a tap-in. And at that point, then all of the expense for maintenance, upkeep, and expansion, and the cost to comply with new water quality standards goes on the ratepayer, because you have no reserve in your sewer fund for capital investment. So you're gonna see an astronomical increase in rates at some point in time, probably in the neighborhood of $100 a quarter or so.
And if we made an increase, and then developers in 6 months started coming to Miles and saying, gee, you know, we wanna build in Bath Township, but the tap-in fees are putting us out of range, then we could bring it back to the Board of Trustees. But I don't anticipate that.
I don't either, because when you consider the cost of a house, this is a very small percentage of the cost of a house. And like Miles said, you got a choice between tapping into the sewer or building a septic system, it's a no-brainer.
Well, and honestly, the only places where you can tap in are you're primarily gonna get developments,
That's
like
correct.
the one across the street. This is not somebody who bought a few acres
No.
out in the country and they're building a house. That's where you're gonna have a septic system.
Correct. And they're gonna pay.
We approved a development in downtown Bath that can't hook up to the sewer
Right.
because we're short a few blocks. And so we can't even think about expanding until we get some money so that we can develop in town.
There's sewer there.
Yeah, no, there'll be, yeah, just to clarify, that I think you're confusing that with water.
There's no water,
but
but
there's sewer.
There's no
Yeah.
water, but there's sewer there.
But we are having issues with expansion of water services down
Okay,
along Main Street.
sure.
Right, yeah, there is sewer there, yeah. Yeah, to your point, Kate, you're absolutely right. This is gonna be, you had something, Brad?
Yeah, just to kind of throw something out there, do we ever see a wastewater treatment plant being developed in the township?
Just to clarify, that's a good question, and I don't know if we've touched on this a lot at the planning commission, probably not, especially in your time here. So, unlike water, where our water lines are owned, operated, and maintained by Board of Water and Light, and, we're kind of at their whim and have to work as a partnership with them, SCUMA, Southern Clinton County Municipal Utility Authority, is a managing and operated entity with a contract with the township. We own the pipe, we own part of the plant, it's our system. So it's almost like, even though the treatment plant is located in DeWitt, it's our plant, we own it.
But assuming it reaches capacity at some point, which.
There was
you know,
just a massive upgrade,
Yeah.
there's actually some good articles from the Lansing State Journal, the plant has now, it's coming on the tail end of its process, there's a massive upgrade to the plant.
So it
Our
has
capacity limit issues will
30-year
will lie here in Bath Township with the size and the lining of our pipe. It will not lie at the plant, there will be capacity at the plant.
So we have basically unlimited capacity
I wouldn't-
based on the current sewer system or?
I wouldn't say it's unlimited.
Not unlimited,
No,
but we
it's
have
not
large
unlimited.
amount of capacity at the plant, we have less capacity within the lines here in Bath Township.
What I mean by unlimited is based on our development capacity.
Yes, I would say that is correct.
Yeah, there's a lot of bottlenecks in our system, and
Yep.
those lie with where various lines and lift stations are in Bath
So
Township.
even if the sewer system were to expand substantially, it would still be sufficient.
For the
Could be
plant,
plant
now
capacity,
we've
yes.
ran into lift station and,
Yeah,
lift
right.
sizes in the township that
Right,
become.
in certain areas of the township, we would be
That
limited,
helps,
yes,
that makes
yes.
sense.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so we've got a second for Mr. Severy's motion. We've had some discussion. Is everybody comfortable with the discussion? Miles, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yeah,
So we're voting for 6,000 or 5, my motion was 6, I guess. the
Your
question-
motion was 6, and it
Do you
was,
wanna change
100.
it, or?
No, I just wanna make sure everybody knows what they're voting on.
yeah.
right, right,
And 150 for
for
the
the
inspection
tap,
fees.
it's the inspection
Okay.
fee.
And, okay, so, Commissioner Crainer,
Yes.
Chair Wright,
Yes.
Trustee Hagerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Severie,
Yes.
Commissioner Almaridge,
Yes.
Commissioner, or Vice Chair Baker, sorry again,
Yes.
and, Commissioner Coulter.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Chair, did you wanna take up that second issue?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, appreciate that. Yes, Mr. Severie suggested that we recommend to the township board that we hire a firm to study the sewerage system and its capacity and the cost of the capital investment that we have. Now, there is a caveat here in that you have to deduct any outside money from the capital investment because Bath did not pay that capital investment. So if you got a grant for $3 million, that's somebody else's money. So I'm sure engineering firms are aware of that, and I'm sure accountants are aware of that. And Mr. Severie and I are aware of it. So I don't know, how does everybody feel about that? Do you
I
want
think
to?
we need to put in, where the purpose of that study is to determine what our connection fee should be. We've got to determine that they're gonna determine all those capital costs and stuff.
And do you want to include in that, Ray, the cost of the new REUs that we're buying from the plant then?
That would be included in it,
Should be anyhow.
yeah.
So Chair, can I just say what our specific recommendation was, just so?
Yeah.
So our specific recommendation, I don't know if we did a great job of spelling that out or not, but what we're seeking was a study to be performed, and our thinking was that the recommendation could come in the form of something like, the planning commission recommends to the board of trustees that as a part of their, 2026 budgeting process, they set aside funds to conduct a study of the sewer tap-in fee and its related capital improvement costs.
Do we also wanna articulate that hiring of an engineering firm to
As
conduct it?
as- I know one member was a fan of that.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, two member.
And I don't know if we have to mention the capital part of it, if we just say we want them to study the sewer system to determine
What the tap-in
what
fee
the capital
should be.
fee should be, because to determine that, they've gotta do the capital cost, we don't need to tell them that.
Okay.
Right. Well, you know, I would like, and I know we've got the master plan coming up, but I've noticed, and Ray and I, you talked about this, there's certain areas of the sewerage system where we're pretty close to being maxed out in terms of what the pipe size can handle. And there's other areas that are totally underutilized. So it seems to me as though there should be some thinking on our part about where is it most practical to have development. And maybe we should be concentrating on development where we have water and we have sewer. And we have some of those infrastructures that are already underutilized, as opposed to building over some other areas where we're gonna have to spend $1 million or $2 million to put in infrastructure. And yeah, we're gonna say it's gonna be on the builder's cost, but that raises the price of the home in there, or the price of the structure in that area, whether it be a business or a house or whatever it is. So, to me, that study should also include areas of the township sewerage system that are close to being built out, or close, areas that could handle more capacity.
So like a utilization.
That does sound like something you, that does sound like something you would get from the sewer master plan.
You would get that, if
Yeah.
it's well done, yes.
Yeah, I think, from what I've heard from Brian Newhoff, we should be getting data that will speak to that.
But
from
I
the
think
sewer master
somebody
plan.
should be asking them if that's part of the study they're doing.
So that should also be included in our master plan that we're gonna do this year.
And if they're doing that as part of the master plan, they should have a cost
That's one of the things we're
attached
talking
to
about.
it.
I don't know if that needs to come, in my opinion, again, you guys obviously do what you want, but that's a separate issue than
Yep.
analyzing the tap-in fee cost.
I agree. But yeah, the master plan is really going to discuss where, based on, because that's the question you asked, John, at the meeting last night, or yesterday, is how do they take into account our infrastructure system? And that's one thing they talked about, is to say that we did look at that based on where we've got infrastructure and where we don't have it, where should we recommend development occur in the township?
Right,
That was
right.
part of that.
Right, and you and I also talked about how cost-effective is some of these infrastructure changes. But that should be part of that master plan study, technically, right?
For sure,
The
so.
ones I've been involved in anyhow.
So what the question tonight is, alright, so, again, staff's recommendation is, that the board of trustees, or that we are suggesting that the planning commission suggests to the board of trustees that as a part of their 2026 budget, they set aside funds for the study of the tap-in fee costs within Bath Township.
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright,
Yep.
I'll make the motion.
okay.
Support?
Okay, we got a motion to support.
One.
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
Alright,
It's not that big a deal.
okay, Commissioner Crainer,
Yes.
Chair Wright,
Yes,
Trustee Hagerman,
Yes,
Commissioner Severie,
Yes.
Commissioner Almaridge.
Yes.
Vice Chair Baker,
Yes,
Commissioner Coulter.
Yes.
okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on to the on-street parking. Unless somebody's got something else. You got anything else, Miles? Want to
Thanks.
move on? Yep, okay.
I just mentioned that, yeah, that all that information that you guys just spoke of will be crucial when we worry about our zoning and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be, yep, yep.
Okay, for this one, obviously, we just had a conversation a while back about, on-street parking and kind of, it was a fascinating conversation for me because there was a real, I felt will to zoom out and like kind of look at what are we doing here with on-street parking. I'm obviously sensitive to that and I want the planning department to be doing obviously the will of the planning commission. So we haven't put anything together yet, we don't have any attachments in this, we kinda just wanted to talk with you guys and figure out, I do think so I looked into it after the meeting, there's not much in Bath Township, if anything, that speaks to on-street parking standards. And there's nothing at the road commission, they defer responsibility to the local units to decide. There is some good examples near us of how they treat on-street parking, and there's a couple simple ways.
and where? I'm sorry.
And DeWitt, Westphalia has a good, ordinance on on-street parking. There's, Ovid Township, I hope I'm saying that right, has, some good ordinances on on-street parking.
Yeah.
So, there's some simple ways that we could talk about it and think about it, but, without going, cause it is 8:20 now, and we still got one item after this, and a report from planner or chair that we need to talk about tonight. That shouldn't take more than like 5 minutes, but, I just wanted to talk about it and just get you guys' thoughts and see what you would like to see from the planning department, your thoughts on this on-street parking issue, cause we did look at a development that has on-street parking, and it would probably be nice to be able to have some standards and create a vision for the corridors where we have on-street parking, which again, right now in Bath Township are few. It's Main Street and, there's on-street parking on Park Lake Road in front of the creamery and the beach area.
Miles, I got a question, and I didn't understand, quite honestly, when we voted on that development downtown, the impact of the on-street parking. I thought those were public parking spaces.
Well,
But in the discussion you and I had, I take it they're dedicated parking spaces for the occupants of those buildings.
that discussion evolved in the meeting, and that is how the ultimate condition came into being.
And I didn't understand that. So are we looking at creating dedicated parking spaces for people that have rentals on the main street in Bath?
I
So,
hope not.
I hope not.
you don't have to, and that's not what we're saying, so this could be simple, or it could be very complicated.
Well, that's what I'm trying to.
So, like,
gather
I'll
around
give you
here.
an example of like, in 3 sentences, how you could word this within Bath Township, because you say, on-street parking is permitted for, general public use, where it is established and signed, and we could say, be it, signed could mean via, signage on the road in terms of striping for a spot, or a sign that says park here, or parallel parking available here. So, available for general public use where it is signed and signaled, within the township. Except for, you have to do except for in this circumstance because of handicap spots, right?
Right.
Except for where the township determines via signage and signaling that it is not available for public use. And then you probably wanna have a caveat just to give yourself some wiggle room of a third sentence that says, and also in the instances where the township has agreements in place with, private entities. Like, so example of why you might want something like that in place is if the township determines that the on-street parking on Park Lake Road is largely utilized exclusively by the creamery for a couple of those spots, and in the future, in some unknown future date, they determine that they'd like to establish an agreement with the creamery for those spots or build something out there, you have the flexibility to do so.
Aren't the creamery spots their own spots on their property?
They have spots on their property, but they also have on-street parking spots, those parallel parking spots that are not their spots. There are spots.
Yeah.
Some of their on-site spots are used for a grill and canopy,
That's true.
stuff like that, which is.
But
true.
the on-street parking they have is not restricted to customers of the creamery
No, it's not.
at present.
But it's not,
It
but
could be.
it could be, and that's where that third sentence comes into play. If you wanted to do like a 15-minute parking sign or something like that and form an agreement with them on something like that, you know. But that, just to give you, that's 3 sentences, boom, standards in place, you got some wiggle room,
So,
issue solved.
Now, I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench in this whole thing, because I'm one of these people that thinks that there's certain areas where the public should be the participant, and there's certain areas where the private enterprise should be this participant. If I'm gonna have dedicated parking for a business, or, well, and a rental is a business in my opinion, that means that I should be, as the owner of the business, responsible for that cost of that parking, the maintenance of it, the upkeep of it,
the snow and.
and snow removal, it should be on my tax roll in a way.
Yep.
However, you're gonna have a problem, I'm sure, because at one time, we had a 4-yard loader and we plowed the snow on Main Street because the county did not, and the county had a absolute fit, cause they didn't want that big 4-yard loader running up and down Main Street plowing snow. And said, don't you ever do that in the future. Now, if you're responsible for the snow removal and the upkeep of the asphalt and so forth in front of your dedicated parking spaces, how are we gonna treat that expense? Are we gonna bill it annually? Are we gonna?
Well, right now, the
Yes.
township is responsible for the snow removal on those parking spaces on Main Street.
Right,
Those are all public spaces.
Yes.
but they're public spaces.
Yep,
And we're also responsible for the asphalt there,
yes,
and we do the striping there.
yes.
Now, are we gonna change that policy then if it becomes a private parking space?
No, that's not what I'm seeking here.
But didn't we do that by
With Esther,
default?
that is what
Yeah,
happened,
it is what
at the
happened, yeah.
request of this body.
Right,
Not-
Some of us voted no.
yeah, 3 people did vote no.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Right.
Because what, I think, you need to be very careful, our zoning ordinance requires a certain number of parking spaces depending on the development. All those parking spaces required by the zoning ordinance should be on private property, should not be on the street.
I don't agree with that.
Because
ordinance
on-street parking is
strongly
not.
No,
recommend
I'm
that.
not saying that's not what the ordinance says, I don't agree that's good, that's bad planning. That's why I've tried to instill, and maybe, so, parking, right, so I'm trying to, parking, 1980s planning, mini malls, parking, we need parking. Right, there's not enough parking, I'm worried about parking, has been the death of many American cities.
Oh, I
The
totally
current planning zeitgeist and thinking is that we need to reduce parking in every avenue we possibly can. And that includes the utilization of on-street parking. If you go to many cities that are being revitalized across this country, from small Midwestern towns to Detroit, one of the main ways they're doing that is getting rid of these grandfathered in parking lots, putting placemaking elements in where those used to take up these abandoned parking lots that no one ever uses until there's a Lions game. And, they're better utilizing their on-street parking. If you want a if the goal is to have, and I don't know if this is the goal for Bath Township, but if the goal is to have a thriving Main Street area, you're going to have to use on-street parking. If you want to have, if you're making the requirement of developers in tight, semi-urban corridor settings to get all of their required parking on site, you're not gonna be able to build in the way where people like to hang. You'll never get a Grand Ledge Main Street by today's zoning standards if you're gonna develop parking in that way.
We're never gonna have a Main Street.
Not with that kind of thinking, you're not.
Well, I mean, so where's the new Main Street? I mean, Webster Corridor.
I would hope
corridor.
I would hope that Main Street and Webster could and planning's a long-term game, we're talking about 50 to 100 years. You don't know what's gonna happen, again, I hate to always bring up this situation. My hometown was a dying downtown in 2009, dying.
Benton.
No one wanted to do anything in that downtown. There are now 5-story buildings in that downtown.
Yeah, but what's the infrastructure difference between Fenton downtown and Bath Main Street?
No, for sure, and you will have to address infrastructure over time. I mean, you have sewer
We
there
don't have sewer
already.
capacity.
You have sewer already, I mean, you have capacity there, Chandler's your issue with capacity, and then there's some issues on Old M78 as well. But water is a problem there, unfortunately, water is a cheaper fix than sewer.
Oh, yeah.
And there are grants available, and that's a goal to work towards over the next 50 to 100 years. I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm an optimist, and maybe that's why
Yeah.
I'm in planning, and maybe you guys are giving me a reality check right now, and that's fair, but I would like to think that we can do better. And we don't have to settle with, that's how it is, it's gonna suck.
Yeah, when you talk about on-street parking for developers, I agree with what you're saying, because any downtown area doesn't have parking available on site for the ability to work. I guess on Main Street, I would say, okay, if we're gonna let him use on-street parking to meet his parking requirement, that's okay, but let's not say it's only those 10 spaces in front of his, or whatever it was, 8 spaces in front of his building. His parking's gotta be on-street, but it can be any place there.
Well, and that's
So
what we're talking,
So all those 8 spaces in front of his thing should not be signed for him only. His residents are gonna have to realize that. It's gonna be like in Chicago, they hope they can find a parking space in the same block they live in.
well, and that is, and, no, for real, like, when I lived in the city of Detroit, that is absolutely how it worked. I lived there for 2 years, I would come home after work, and I would have to drive the block and find a spot.
Yeah.
But,
But be careful now, that's not what we agreed to with Mr. Estrud on that.
no, that's not what we
It's
agreed
not.
to, and that's what I'm trying to say, this is a broader conversation of, we got into a pickle a little bit with that
Yeah,
one,
I
because
think
we
we did.
hadn't had this conversation, so
No.
what are some elements of that, it sounds like what I'm hearing is, if we do establish on-street parking, we want it to be for public use, but I guess what I'm asking back is, can you then count that into their parking, if they establish and pay for it, can you count that into their parking? Are you forcing them to fulfill 100% of that requirement on site? Which I guess I'm saying from the planning perspective could be a challenging bar to make and could limit what could be built here in the future.
It sounds, I mean, from decision-making today, I mean, this board eschews a utopian,
Yeah, but
lack of flexibility in decision-making, so
do you
why
see
would
what
you
you
start simply been,
See what you started?
Yeah, but do you want every development to have to be a PUD? I don't want that for you guys.
no, but I mean,
But that is,
PUD or any ordinance, we tend to look the other way when, we're looking at the face of a developer. And so,
I don't know if that's true, but like with the Taco Bell in Bath Township. So that was before my time, I think you might have been on the planning commission when that came in,
board.
okay. The only way that got in was through the PUD ordinance.
Yeah.
So like Taco Bell is a PUD, and that's the PUD tools have been built because things are restricting, these planning ordinance have been built out, these zoning ordinance have been built out over such a long period of time. So I guess what I'm just trying to do is spark a conversation about like, how can we be thinking about parking and
I would also offer
gains
that
of
let's make sure it's enforceable, because I do think parking enforcement falls on the shoulders of the police department here primarily, so.
Yeah, it does.
That's something that should be factored into the conversation.
Well, and that's another reason, enforcement's, I'm glad you brought that up, enforcement's another reason to maybe wanna get some of this language on the books, because within a vacuum, any enforcement that ever would go to court, they'd be like, okay, well, what's the county's rules for on-street parking? Okay, there's nothing, okay, what's Bath Township's rules? Okay, there's nothing? I don't really know here, what are we gonna do with this, guys?
Yeah, well, why are you even here?
Yeah,
Yep.
so,
Might be smart to look into asking the county for their opinion, not that we have to take it.
that's a good point, asked the county for their opinion, they said, that's on you, man.
That's typical
Looking
for the
at a
county.
downtown area, or like at the corner of Clark and Webster, there's that big parking lot there. That's available to anybody, and I don't know when the Dollar General went in, what their parking requirements were, but they met them by that existing parking lot. And in a downtown area, you're gonna have parking lots or parking ramps or something.
Well, that's a Dollar General's a good point, no, they didn't meet them by that existing parking lot, they required Dollar General to put on-street parking on their lot, even though you have a giant unused lot, that's the exact thinking I'm talking about, that's
Yeah.
kinda problematic.
Can you explain a little bit?
Could have more green space.
Because we've had this discussion privately about, the revitalization and parking.
I mean, I did, as I already kinda said it, like, there's this group that, if anybody's interested, they could, check out, it's called, like, I'll send it out. I wanna say it's called Strong Towns. They do a journal and a magazine, and they talk a lot about issues like this, and one of their main kind of bread and butter issues is, there's these places that people love to go and hang out, and all those places are illegal to build in 2025. And so it's about kind of the legalization of building places that people like to be. And I guess that's kind of the issue, I'm like, kind of the hill I'm dying on up here right now.
Yeah.
But there's but again, at the end of the day, I'm not gonna set you guys are gonna set what you want. If you guys tell me as a group, hey, we want on-street parking, it's gotta be, if it exists, it's available to the public only, and we're firm on, at least in this community, the parking calculation shall only be calced moving forward using the parking on site, I can live with that, I'm fine with that.
Well, what I was referring to is our discussion about parking on the other, like when you have a business that is big enough, I forget your example exactly, but there's like a business that only allows X number of people in it, but there's only 10 parking spots out front. So then you have to park.
Yeah, it's the same, we already kinda talked about with like when my experience of living in Detroit, but what he's talking about was I looked at a business that is kind of a multimodal restaurant, they have some food trucks in the summer, and the pedestrian capacity in that building is something like 250 people, and I looked, so they have 250 people of potential capacity there, and during the summer days, they can probably get up there. The amount of spaces in their parking spot was 35 spaces, so like, their parking spot by no means is keeping up. Now, how do they address the shortfall in parking? They do on-street parking wherever they can find a space, you gotta drive around, and so like, in this example, I happen to know about this place, cause I'm a millennial and I go to breweries, and so me and my brother went to this brewery and we wanted to go there, cause it's a cool spot, it's a place where people wanna be, probably because they were able to sacrifice some of their parking, and they had a beer garden, which was cool, but they couldn't have had that beer garden if they had a large parking standard to keep up with, and so we had to park at the State Bank and walk a block. The State Bank was built in the 80s and has a giant parking lot that they don't need. So
You basically could park on the street or a back street, so if Main Street had a business, you'd park on a side street.
Park on High Street and walk to Main Street.
Yeah, which is only a block.
It's a block. Alright, so,
Oh, I
just
think that's-
just for time, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, do you want us to look at what Westphalia and DeWitt have and maybe bring that back, and maybe this body can tell us what they like and don't like?
Yeah, just take a quick look at it, Miles, let's not spend a lot of time.
Yeah,
on
no,
it,
I'll
but-
just literally print it off, put it in the
Yeah,
packet, and we can
yeah,
discuss it
that's
further.
fine, but, yeah,
Okay,
okay. So is that part of your report, or?
nope,
Nope, you got a report as well?
Yep.
Good, thank you.
okay, The main things in the report that we wanted to talk about, I just wanted to give the body an RFP update. Myself, the chair, the assessor, Commissioner Severie, met with some of the consultants that, responded to our RFP request for firms that could help us engage in this comprehensive planning process. It went well. We had some technology and or room issues with getting a room where we could even hold this meeting in the township, putting that aside. I think it went well, and I think we were able to get the information that we were seeking out of these interview processes. So that was kind of point A on the RFP update. So moving to point B here, discussing the April 22nd meeting. So, and Chair, Commissioner Severie, correct me if I'm wrong on anything, the problem for me, as why I asked if we could form an ad hoc interview committee, is planning's a niche field, it's super small, and I know all of these people. So I definitely didn't wanna be in a position to like make any kind of recommendation in a vacuum without input from other people. Because there's 3 firms that responded, and I knew people at every firm. I went to school with at least one person that works at one of these firms. So, we had the meeting, I kinda held my opinions back, on what my thoughts were on what firm I thought was better than the other firms. It seemed like the group as a whole, outside of my opinions, kinda came to the same conclusion I came to, kinda rather quickly, I would say. I think it was apparent, kinda who the number 1, firm was. So as a group, we were kinda unanimous on what we thought good firm is. So in anticipation of something like that being a possibility, I don't know if you guys looked or received my email about the possibility of, if that ended up being the case, which it did end up being the case, there could have been a world where uncanceling the April 22nd meeting could have been a reality, and then bringing that firm in front of this body to make sure you guys are kind of feeling and getting the sense that at least our ad hoc committee did. And again, an effort to just be transparent and have the planning commission be the driving force here, is kind of where the ad hoc committee landed. So after they and myself included, unanimously came to the decision of like, hey, we like this firm, this is a great firm, we think they were above these other firms in a myriad of ways. We wanna get them in front of the planning commission. I guess what we're asking this body tonight is to, if that sounds good to you guys, and the effort of time, cause it's the 4th month of the year, and one thing you gotta remember about this grant is there is a time clock on this. And so I'm trying to be cognizant of that as well. The grant was given to us at the beginning of January in 2025. The plan, to fulfill the requirements of the grant, the plan needs to be adopted by the Board of Trustees in January 2027. On average, a master plan, cause it's a process, there's a best practice here. On average, it takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to get a comp plan accomplished. So if we hold a meeting on April 22nd, we are able to get a recommendation to the board. That puts us at the beginning of May, and if they're able to execute a contract, in one meeting, then we'll be, if not, it'd be 2nd meeting in May that it could get done. That would put us bringing on a consultant in the 5th month of this year, which would give us roughly 19 months to get this adopted.
Can I make a motion?
I have a question, what exactly are you looking for us to provide you?
Well, the first thing we gotta do is have the meeting on the one.
All I'm looking for tonight is a motion and a second to uncancel the meeting on April 22nd.
Right, and he's elaborating the purpose of the meeting, basically.
Yeah, the purpose of that meeting would be a single purpose to talk to this one consulting firm.
Right, they would come
what
in
purpose?
person and we would be able to interview them.
If the ad hoc committee is making a recommendation to us,
Correct, that's the plan.
then why have the meeting for time? If you've made a decision that you would be bringing forward to us, let's have that decision, forward it to the board, that saves you 2 to 3 weeks.
That's what we wanna do on the 22nd. Bring you
That was the
bring you
purpose of
that
the meeting on the
recommendation in
22nd.
writing.
But Jason's asking,
I'm saying we could decide that right now,
I don't,
but with your recommendation.
is that what you're saying, Jason?
well, I mean, there's two outcomes of that meeting. One is, yay,
Yay,
this is
and-
great, go ahead, move forward. The other
Is nay.
this is a terrible organization,
Right.
but we can't be in that position because we don't know what the other two bids were. And so we're kind of locked in terms of what we as a board can do.
You could think they're terrible and still say no, and we'll bring you back other options.
But then we run into the timeline issue.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be messing with our timeline, but that, you know, whatever.
Is
That's
what it
okay.
is.
It is what it is.
Then we'll just say, you'll have to at other points in the process hurry up.
Well, we're having a discussion about a motion technically, so let's get a motion on the floor, and then let's decide
Well,
But do we need the meeting?
what.
Yeah, that's.
At some point, you've gotta have a motion from the planning commission to send this to the board of trustees.
I move
You
to
can't
send this
do
to
it
the
to an
Board of
item
Trustees
on-
I
as is.
second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there-
Thank you, that takes care of that.
Okay, thank you, that took care of that. Is there any discussion?
I have a discussion. I wanna
Okay.
ask Miles his opinion of that last move.
Opinion of what?
Are you
The
okay
motion?
with us doing that, or would you prefer?
Yeah,
to
no,
bring-
that'd be fine, that saves
Would you
us time.
prefer?
I feel confident, let me see, that saves us time. I hear Commissioner Almaridge's concern, and I think that it would have been nice to, bring every firm that we got a response from in front of the planning commission. I think that is taxing on the firms and on us.
Yeah,
That's why, you know, we've kind of put the faith in the ad hoc committee,
Well, I think that's it. I think we have faith in the ad hoc committee
Yes,
and trust their recommendation to move it
and
to the
just
board.
if we're
And there
gonna-
is one step, and that is the board, and if the board hates this committee, then it doesn't go,
Yeah,
or hates
and-
the recommendation, then it doesn't go forward.
And just to expand upon it, because it hasn't been mentioned, cause we had the intention, I guess, of giving a form, I didn't have time, cause we held this meeting yesterday.
Right.
So I had time to, we interviewed all the firms yesterday, so I had time to write it up and get it in the packet last Thursday, that's impossible. But,
I mean, what's the point of an ad hoc committee if we just have to redo all the work here in the large group?
But
Like, the
if you're
committee
about-
makes a recommendation.
well,
if you're about to take a vote on this, so I just wanna say, because I think it's worth saying, that the firm that we were looking at is Gibson and Webster, they're out of Detroit, they have, engineers, planners, they're very talented, and they come highly recommended. I think they'll be a great firm, and I think you guys will get the best comprehensive plan this community has for sure ever gotten.
Is there any reason we can't say who the other two firms were?
You can say, yeah, so we looked at, so there were 3 firms that responded to our RFP, and by the way, we did send it out to a local Lansing firm, which did not respond to our RFP. So, you know, we try to go local, but, you know, not everyone wants to participate in our process, that's fine. We gave ample time to respond to the RFP too, so it's not like we just gave, that was something where staff made the call to, hey, this is an area where we wanna get more time, so we hopefully cast a wide net. But, we looked at Williams and Works, which everyone's familiar with, and they are out of GR, and we've used them in the past for our rec plans and our non-motorized plan. And we looked at, Row Planning, which is out of the city of Flint. And they responded, but it, again, I like to get full right out of the gate. If I kept my opinions to myself, and I did find it interesting that the ad hoc committee, all separately, which are very different people, obviously, immediately almost came to the conclusion of like, this is the clear choice.
I mean, we appreciate the attempt at transparency of bringing them before us for a
Thank you.
conversation.
thank you.
But at the same time, I think we're in agreement that, no, we're good.
Yep.
Okay, if you're I didn't wanna make that call, okay?
Yeah.
Roll call.
So, now, that means we don't need the meeting then on the 22nd.
So the motion was to, move forward.
Right,
Move the recommendation of the subcommittee forward to the Board of Trustees for a vote of approval.
right, right.
My second stands.
And your second stance, okay. Yeah, I'd like a roll call.
Cool, okay. Let me find a little page to mark here. Okay, Commissioner Crainer,
Yes.
Chair Wright,
Yes,
Trustee Hagerman,
Yes?
Commissioner Severies,
Yes.
Commissioner Almaridge,
Yes.
Vice Chair Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Coulter.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That's quick. And we don't need the meeting. So we don't need to schedule a meeting, Miles.
Yep.
We can unschedule a meeting again.
No, we could schedule the meeting and talk about renewable energy ordinances.
Or we could talk about parking. Do you wanna schedule a meeting anyhow and talk about parking?
I'm not gonna answer
Public
that.
comments number 10.
Hey, I will say that, when we were speaking with the consultants, it kind of, did help reaffirm that setting aside a meeting each month so we can have time while this process plays out was a very good idea, because the consultants talked about, you know, how it's gonna be really nice to have dedicated meetings for this process to play out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You said that was wholly grant funded?
Right now, we might, depending on some options, and I do have to talk, I'm gonna follow up and I'll work on them a little bit on pricing, but we could go a couple thousand over and have to pull from the planning department's budget, which is fine.
Yeah, we put money in the planning budget for the master plan, so we can go over,
Oops, sorry.
no, that's fine.
Public comments.
Yes, no, I don't think there's any public here, George. Kate, you wanna give us an update on?
Sure, we had a meeting last night, and I know we've touched on a few of the things already. I did want to share that the, Dan Hayes, who's the chair of the Park Lake Advisory Board, came and presented his extremely comprehensive report
He
of
does a very-
the lake over the past year, including water levels, wildlife, weed treatment, which that seems to be a big struggle for Park Lake. In 2024 was weed management. They were not very successful with that, and some invasive plant species that they have there. The report's available in the board packet from last night, but if you're curious, it was very thorough, and it gives a wealth of data about the lake and water quality and wildlife and lots of things. The Board of Trustees are meeting next week to do some training to learn about the MERS retirement system, which we're looking at making some changes to in the township, as well as some other items that come up. We also voted to approve the employment agreement for the current chief, and he was sworn in last night, so is now Chief Mardigan, in charge of the Bath Township Police Department. And we had like 30 people here, and they all left right after that, so it was just us for the rest of the meeting. We made some changes to sewer rates and those for the mobile home parks. The Tom King Junk Day is coming up at the end of the month, so if you haven't signed up for that, that is definitely available. There's still space. If you'd like to volunteer, I know that they're looking for some volunteers as well to direct traffic and help out in a variety of areas, if that's something you're interested in. We approved a agreement, speaking of Meadowbrook, with the Board of Water and Light for a water service agreement for the Meadowbrook Phase 3 that we all had looked at, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. So that's moving forward, and then I think that was about it.
Did you guys take action after the closed session?
We did take action.
What was that?
Do you want me to say? The action that we took, I mean, I guess it was a public motion, was to authorize the superintendent to negotiate the terms of the resignation of the fire chief.
Yeah, I was just curious. I didn't know
Yeah,
what
that
you
was
guys
the
did.
motion, and it
That's the
passed.
motion? Oh.
That was the motion after the closed session, and it passed. So I imagine that will take place.
Interesting. Is he retiring then?
I believe so. I would believe so, yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Great, thank you. Okay, let's do commissioner comments. Anybody got any more comments? Go ahead, Jason.
It's not a comment, this is, Miles, I don't know if you're aware of this, at the Tri-County Planning meeting where
The one
we
in
discussed
Hopewell?
the highway on-ramp, Amanda, I think is her name, from Tri-County Planning, one of the staff members, broached a topic with us that Bath Township, because it reached a threshold of population size, now must seek federal permits for wastewater management. And if we don't do that, we are liable for fines.
Okay.
Yeah, that-
So,
Speak to SCUMA, I hope they're on it.
we, well, no, not,
No, that'd be drain
Like
commission.
stormwater management?
Stormwater management,
Okay, I'll
yeah.
speak with the drain
Stormwater.
commission, I hope
That'd be
they're on it.
John and Ted.
well, no, so because we asked her, you were part of that conversation?
I was with,
Okay, you were.
yeah, I was, yes, it was Amanda, because I was having lots of fun with her.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you were.
Yes, I was really
So,
tweaking her.
There's no proactive mechanism for communicating this to townships, and so she brought it up because it was a found opportunity, and so I just wanted to relay that, so that,
I'll speak with them.
and the permits are like $500, it's not
Yeah.
like,
No, I'll speak with them, I mean, thanks for bringing that up.
Yep.
Yeah, that was an interesting meeting.
Yes, it sure was.
I heard that the person, the consulting firm was doing it, didn't do a very good job.
No, they weren't even from Michigan, and they didn't know anything about the area, they hadn't even studied it.
I registered for that meeting, but I couldn't go, unfortunately, I'd like to have gone.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, I thought.
There's a lot of food.
Food spray could have been better, I was hoping for some shrimp.
The cookies were gone. There's lots of carrots left, but
Yeah, there
cookies
was-
were
I
all
guess there's a lot
Lots-
of people from my neighborhood that went, I'll have to talk to some of them, see.
Hot Cow was well represented.
Yeah,
Yes,
Hawkeye
it was well
very
represented.
Well,
represented, right?
after I registered, I said, I registered for this, this is all the information, because once you register, you get a lot more information than just what was there. And I sent that to a whole
Oh,
neighborhood, so they all said, well, if you're gonna maybe put an interchange up there, we want.
oh, that got.
Some people liked the idea and some people didn't.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting meeting, it really was.
so for those who weren't there, it was basically a poster session, so they had a series of posters, some of which you could interact with, but it was a variety of data about the growth of the township, and then accidents and other things that were lending itself towards the importance of putting a on-ramp in that location.
Did they discuss more than that? Because
No,
when,
Well,
There's no
I wouldn't say
discussion.
when you
no.
go on, when you went on to register this thing, they actually had a map that showed where comments were coming from. The comments were coming from Portland and all over the place. So it made it to me like the discussion could expand.
They have Tri-County has a website where they can
Yeah.
take in, I mean, that's what happens when you put your comments on a website.
If you took the
you'll-
survey, it was primarily just questions about safety and
Yeah.
your use of transportation,
Yeah,
modes of
comments about
transportation.
needing non-motorized access on Park Bank
Chandler.
Road, Chandler, and other places.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting, they had, as a proposal, the entrance ramp on Chandler Road, but as well, also ramps on State Road off 127.
Yes, I thought that was
Which I
very
thought that was,
interesting.
I had never really considered that as an
Oh,
option,
that was brought up
but,
several years ago by Tri-County.
I thought that that was interesting as well.
Yeah, they wanted access to the airport that way.
Yeah. It's a good way to get to the airport on State Road.
Yeah.
It
That's
is?
how I go, oh yeah, that's how I go. Just State Road, straight across.
I never use the airport, so if I was gonna
Doesn't
use an
matter.
airport, it'd either be Metro or Grand Rapids or Flint.
That's why I like
We
GR.
try to avoid Metro as much as we can.
Well, yeah, I could share that.
I mean, I hate going to
You
I
had
Metro.
the
thank
comment?
those that behind the scenes at work every day to
It's a long
prepare
drive from
packages.
Bath.
Yeah.
Grand Rapids Airport's where it's at, all the way.
I like Flint Bishop.
Yeah, Flint's cool, it's convenient.
Get good
Either
connection,
one,
either one, yeah.
easy.
Yeah, anything but Metro or Lansing.
Metro's getting all the hate.
Lansing's got a lot of freight.
What is this hate about?
Just how far away it is.
It's expensive to park.
Any other comments?
I'm excited to see the sidewalk progress moving forward.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jason, for getting that going.
Big show.
Yes.
they're really getting with that, aren't they? Good, good. Anybody wanna make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody for